35 years ago, various types of evil spirits suddenly appeared from the Dark Continent. The demons that began to attack people and destroy everything that came their way were unstoppable. For humanity, this was something impossible. Because of the global attack of demons, people called this time disappearance of the world. Everything around was blazing with fire and was destroyed. But there were still people who fought back against the monsters. They used different weapons. For example, one of the warriors used a fire spear to defeat the monster. To reclaim the stolen territory, all of humanity united. Scientists from all over the world spent 20 years studying the characteristics of demons and discovering magic. The man with the fire spear managed to hit the monster and defeat it. The monster began to choke and eventually turned into a puddle. Simple magic was just a way to prolong life. Humanity needed much greater power. That is why humanity focused on natural phenomena. Humanity was able to find the answer to the question of how to gain enormous power and defeat monsters. In the year 435, according to the Holy Calendar, humanity finally discovered the spirit. People looked at the girls with admiration as they raced straight ahead. There were 5 of them in total. The power of spirit magic, obtained by making a deal with the spirits of contracts, greatly surpasses that of simple magic. Thus, humanity finally succeeded in driving the demons back to the Dark Continent. Spirits include 7 attributes: fire, water, wind, earth, thunder, light, and darkness. Spirits are divided into 4 ranks: lowest rank spirit, intermediate rank spirit, and imperial rank spirit. In each of the 7 attributes, fire, water, wind, earth, thunder, light, and darkness, there is only one imperial spirit. 5 of them, fire, water, wind, earth, and thunder, are called the 5 Imperial Beasts. It was the power of the 5 Imperial Beasts that was able to defeat the demons. In a small village, people gathered. They looked at a boy named Bonett. From his very childhood, great hopes were placed on him, as he was a very capable boy. The boys threw fireballs at the girl. The girl dropped to the ground and tried to cover herself. One of the boys addressed the girl, calling her a newbie, and said that she was not allowed to use magic. The girl covered herself with her hands and began to scream that she was in pain. She asked her offenders to stop. The girl heard someone cast the water wall spell and covered her. She looked up and saw a dark-haired boy. Bonett stood right in front of the girl and pointed his hand at her bullies. He was saying that bullying the weak is low. One of the boys, whose name was Bram, pointed at and shouted his name. He turned his head to the side and noticed that all his other friends had run away. Other boys approached them. They pointed at saying that he was the shudder-inducing magician. The second boy was amazed by his appearance. The boy who threw fireballs at the girl frowned when he heard that the fairy was considered a gifted child. Bram remembers how showed his sister his abilities. The girl was delighted, and said that she too could do anything if she studied well. Bram watched his brother and sister. He was dissatisfied. Suddenly a girl came up to him and said that if he was jealous of he could try to do something similar himself. The boy just shouted her name. Bram was angry because all his sisters talked only about That's why he didn't like Bram pointed his hand at and started to talk negatively about him. Used magic to launch his brother into the air. Bram screamed. Thought that there was no point in comparing himself to Bram or other children of the same generation. The girl who was attacked turned to wiping away her tears, and thanked her brother for saving her once again. Reached out to help the girl up. She climbed onto her brother's back and he carried her back home. They were watched by passers-by who were amazed by the way treated her sister. The Bonett family, having received the title of Duke, must pass this title on to the eldest brother, The Bonett family is one of the 7 influential families of the Kingdom of Armando. Because of Faye's enormous magical power, which surpasses even adults, and his masterful ability to control it, he is called the Tremor-Inducing Mage. All the residents of the Bonett estate were happy to see Faye. They asked their children to try to befriend the boy. Everyone was sure that Bonett could become an unrivaled spiritualist. Bonett and his parents returned to the estate. They were met by the maids. Faye's parents walked ahead while the maids bowed to them. They went into the living room and sat down on the sofas. Mother Fairy stroked her son's head and talked about how he would soon have his 7th birthday. Father Fairy was happy that his son would be 7 years old. Turned to his father and asked what would happen if things didn't go as planned and he failed. Faye's father asked what that meant. All children, upon reaching the age of 7, go to church and sign a contract called Spirit Contract. Whether a child has the ability to communicate with spirits or not is determined the same way all over the world. If a child fails when making a contract with a spirit, he will always be looked down upon by others, and his future career will immediately become hopeless. So 7 years old is a special age that affects the rest of his life. Was very tense. He knew that he could not fail, otherwise he would suffer for the rest of his life. The next day, everyone gathered to celebrate Bonett's 7th birthday. Everyone was happy that had a birthday. They couldn't wait for the moment when he would make a contract with the spirit. All the inhabitants of the estate were in anticipation. They thought that something amazing was going to happen that day. Everyone gathered near the church. The priest met the fairy and his family. He asked them to follow him inside the church. Faye and his family went inside. The boy was amazed to see a huge number of grains of light. His father came up to him and explained that they were spirits. In a church full of magical power, the lowest spirits prefer to live. Spirits of the lowest, middle, and highest ranks prefer nature to churches. The priest says that based on long-standing traditions, the fairy must make a contract with the spirit. The priest asks the boy to hold his hand over the spirit. He asked the boy to show his magical power. Faye raised his hand and walked towards one of the spirits. Faye's parents couldn't wait for the contract to be concluded with the spirit. Faye exhaled, opened his eyes, and made a request to the spirit. He said that he wanted to make a contract with the spirit to gain its powers. Faye tells the spirit that he will repay with his power, and he will give back his magic power. Faye says that if this contract is possible, then the spirit can take his magic power and enter it. All the people watched as the boy was enveloped in magic. Magic began to spread throughout the church. Everyone was amazed by Faye's abilities. Mother Faye was also delighted, and the father at that moment smiled and thought that his son was very capable. He wanted Faye to show all his strength and capabilities. Suddenly the spirit flew away from Faye. The boy looked at it in confusion. He did not understand why this happened. The priest approached the boy and said that he and this spirit were incompatible. He asked the boy to approach other spirits and try to make a contract with one of them. Faye approached other spirits to make a contract, but he couldn't do it. They all just flew away. The observers turned to the boy and said that the battle was much more difficult. They had already come to terms with the fact that the boy was unable to make a contract with any of the spirits. At this time, Faye's entire family looked at him gloomily. Faye turned around and looked at his parents with horror. Bram was also watching all this, wondering why everyone thought it would be so easy to make a contract with a spirit. Faye recalled all the words about his outstanding abilities that people around him had told him. He remembered his father, who confidently said that his son would make a contract with a spirit. Faye's gaze snapped to his brother. Bram tilted his head and glared at Faye. Faye understood that his entire fate depended on this spiritual contract. The boy decided to use all his magical power. Everyone watched and felt a powerful magical aura. Faye reached out his hand and tried to make a contract with the other spirits again, but they all flew away from him at once. All the observers were amazed that the spirits just up and ran away from Faye. The boy's mouth dropped open in surprise. As everyone left the church, there was a lot of discussion. People couldn't believe that Faye had failed to make a contract with the spirit. They all saw great potential in him. Faye turned around and looked at his parents. They were very gloomy. The boy turned back and bowed his head. It started to rain, and Faye at that moment realized that everything was over since he was unable to make a contract with the spirit. The whole family returned back to the estate. Faye immediately returned to his room. He sat on the bed and pulled his legs towards him. Mama Fairy asked her husband what they would do. She wondered how her son could do this to them. Father Faye understood that they couldn't leave things as they were. They needed an heir who would have a contract with the spirit. At this time, Faye stood near the door of the room and overheard his parents' conversation. Then he decided that he still needed to go back to the room. When Faye was already sitting in his room, his brother came to him and said that this was the end for the boy. Faye just looked at him and said nothing. Bram was displeased that Faye didn't respond to him. Then Bram heard his name being called. He smiled and ran to his parents, waving his hand to his brother at the end. Faye lowered his head and became gloomy. He thought that from that day on, all the members of his family became completely different people. As Faye walked down the street, he overheard a group of boys discussing what happened at the church. People simply couldn't believe that Faye had failed to make a contract with the spirit. Faye approached the group of boys. They noticed the boy and suddenly fell silent. Faye smiled and asked if everything was okay. The boys started waving their hands and saying that everything was fine. Faye doesn't listen to the boys until the end and leaves. They all looked at each other in bewilderment. Faye approached the tree, remembering the words that the boys he had recently met had said about him. Faye closed his eyes and began to use his magic. Suddenly, he heard someone's delight. Faye turned around and saw a boy sitting on a bench, showing off his spirit. Next to him stood a girl who was delighted with his contract with the spirit. Faye lowered his hands and frowned. Then he decided that he shouldn't despair. He raised his head and decided that he just needed to concentrate. Faye returned home. At that moment, the maid came to him and said that his father was calling him. She said that his father was waiting for him in the study. The guy looked at the maid in surprise, and then said that he was going to his father. Faye walked down the hallway and then noticed something unusual. He ran up to the photos hanging on the wall and saw that all of his images had been removed. Some had even been crossed out. Faye walked into his father's office and stood directly in front of his desk, where he was currently sitting. His mother, brother, and sisters stood at a distance from their father. Faye looked at his father with horror as he waited for what he would say. His father turned to Faye and said that he was no longer part of their family. The man orders Faye to immediately pack her things and leave the mansion. Faye's eyes widen in shock. One of the sisters looked dejected. The older sister did not express any emotions, and Bram stood and smiled. Mom looked at her son with disgust. Faye ran out into the street. He ran and cried. The boy was so angry that he began to swear, cursing everything. Faye recalled all the words of his family, who supported him when they thought he was a capable boy. The boy does not notice the branch, stumbles, and falls to the ground. He clenches his hands very tightly in anger. Then the boy notices a ball on the ground. He remembers how his sisters gave him a glass ball for his birthday, just like he wanted. Faye starts crying even harder. He hoped that his father would stop him as he ran out into the street, but nothing happened. Faye lay down on the ground and looked at the sky. Suddenly he felt a strong magical power. The boy stood up and leaned on his hands. He noticed that people from the family had come for him. They approached the boy and apologized. They said that they were going to deal with the boy once and for all as ordered by the master. Faye looks at the boys in horror, and at that moment they start using fireballs to attack the boy. Faye is not afraid of elemental fire magic. He rises completely from the ground, puts his hands forward and uses mid-level water magic, the spell Water Wall. Water Magic Fairy puts out all the fireballs of the offenders. But the guys shout that this is not the end and use wind magic, calling a hurricane and mixing it with fire magic. Faye realizes that they are trying to create a fire tornado, using mid-level fire and wind magic combined. One of the boys says that the boy is really creepy. He notes that you can tell just by the movement of his magic power. Faye glares at his offenders. Faye knew from childhood that simple magicians were much less powerful than spiritualists. The boy thought about how in Armando's kingdom, the eldest son usually became the heir. If everything really went as usual, he would become the new head of the family. Faye knew that his father Alex's greatest fear was losing his title as duke, and no longer being in the top 5 most influential people. The boy's thoughts were stopped by a fiery tornado that was heading straight towards him. Faye understood that with his level of magic, he would not be able to counterattack or block. Faye drops to her feet and enchants them. Then she suddenly takes off and runs away. One of the guys sighs and says that Faye is very stubborn. The fire tornado was still trying to reach Faye. The boy did not give up and continued to run. Extra systemic magic, which allowed the body to be enchanted, was necessary in cases of introducing magical forces into every cell of the body. This magic was used to enhance physical abilities. The fire tornado still hit Faye and he fell, starting to cough in pain. Then he got up again and continued running. The boy ran through the forest, trying to escape from his abusers. He was in a lot of pain, but he had to escape. He tried not to think, but to concentrate instead. The boy suddenly felt a side effect of the magic. He lost the feeling in his legs and began to fall forward. Faye fell to the ground and crashed into a tree. He cursed as his vision began to darken. Faye was lying on the ground, bleeding. He was in a lot of pain. His vision was gradually getting dark. He wondered if this was really his end. He couldn't believe that it would end in such a place and just because of one failure. Faye decided not to give in to his emotions. He abruptly stopped the flow of his thoughts and decided that his life would not end like this. Faye decided that no matter what it took, he had to escape. He was going to win his life. Faye remembered the boy's words about his father ordering the body to be burned after their mission was completed. Faye assumed that the best option would be to create a copy of himself. He thought that this would definitely allow him to escape. The boys were following the boy's trail. One of them asked where Faye was. The boy was hiding behind a tree. Faye looked at the boys and thought that there must be something he could do. Faye was thinking about what would happen if he used volumetric magic and covered it with black. The boy used mid-level earth magic, the clay doll spell, and in addition he used mid-level darkness magic. And then he combined both magics. The boys saw the boy and approached him. They saw a body lying on the ground. But in fact, it was a dark doll created by combining the highest level of darkness and earth magic. The boys thought that Faye had passed out. One of the boys asked if the boy had fallen because he was tired. The boys ended up using magic, summoning a fire tornado and burning the doll. Faye was sitting near a tree at that moment, pressing his hand to his wound. It was very painful for him. Suddenly someone came up to the boy and asked him if he was okay. The boy's eyes widened in surprise and he rose from the ground. A girl came up to him and extended her hand. The boy looked at her warily. The boy did not offer his hand. The girl pressed it to herself and said that the boy was definitely not okay. She said that his wounds looked painful. The girl landed right in front of the boy and asked the boy to be patient for a while. She said that she could cure the boy. and then she started humming a song. Faye looked at the girl in confusion. The girl gets up from the ground and says that she is just joking, so the boy doesn't have to worry. The girl starts using magic, which surprises the fairy. She raises her hands and uses the spell Full Recovery. Faye felt his whole body return to normal. He realized that the girl had used the highest level of water magic, the spell Full Healing. The wound on the boy's stomach had completely healed. Faye then raised his head and looked at the girl in amazement. She smiled and said that the boy should be fine now. Faye knew that healing magic was very difficult to master. Full Healing was a top-level magic. He was amazed that the girl used it with unusual ease. The girl says that Faye shouldn't move much, as the wound hasn't healed completely yet. Faye thanks the stranger, and the girl says in response that it was not difficult. She asks how the boy ended up in the forest with such terrible wounds. Faye immediately frowned. The girl looked at the guy in bewilderment. Faye wondered if he could so frivolously tell everything to a stranger. He remembered his entire family and the sentence he was given. The girl looks at the boy with a smile and waits for his reaction. Faye was still tense. Suddenly, the girl begins to calm the boy. Faye raises her head and looks at the girl in surprise. He asks what this means. The girl smiles and says that she lives alone in the forest. She convinces the boy that everything he tells her will remain between them. She tries to convey to him that they are not enemies. Faye's eyes widen in surprise. He wondered why the girl was so nice to him. The girl comes up to the boy and strokes his head. She says that he had a very scared expression on his face. Faye looks at the girl confused. Then she asks if he really seemed so scared to her. The girl sits down next to Faye. The boy begins to tell how his birthday went. The boy finishes and says that his father kicked him out of the house because he did not make a contract with the spirit, and then he sent his people after him. He finishes the story and says that this is how it all happened. The girl says that this is not unusual, since the Bonnets always care only about their title and reputation. The girl falls silent. Faye turns and looks at her questioningly. The girl suddenly perks up and says that if the boy has nowhere to go, he can come with her. Faye asks where they are going. The girl smiles and says that she always dreamed of having a son. She asks if this could be fate. The boy is silent for a while. Then he asks if he can afford to push the girl around. The girl pats the boy on the back and tells him he doesn't have to be so modest. Faye says the girl hits him hard with her hand. The girl smiles and says they have an agreement. She says her name is Lana Dirk. The boy says his first name, then adds the girl's last name, and it turns out to be Faye Dirk. The girl is silent for a while, so the boy tenses up and asks what happened. She replies that everything is fine and says that from now on the boy's name is Faye Dirk. The boy blushes, repeating his new last name. The girl and the boy rise from the ground. Lana takes the boy by the hand and leads him along. She says that she likes his new last name. She is happy to welcome the boy into her family. Faye asks the girl to take care of him. The girl asks if the boy can call her mom. Faye immediately agrees. 6 years later, Faye woke up in his bed and sat up straight. He looked at his hands and realized he was sweating. Lana suddenly bursts into his room and greets Faye. The guy looks at Lana in shock. The girl approaches the guy and asks if he wants to eat or take a shower. Faye then asks how the girl manages to come as soon as he wakes up. Lana says she simply cast a spell on his bed to let her know he was awake. Faye demands that she remove the spell. The girl notices that Faye is sweating a lot. She hugs herself and says that they definitely need to take a shower together. The guy at that moment grabs a change of clothes and runs to the shower. The guy locks himself in the shower. Lana comes to the door and shouts angrily that there is no need to close the door with magic. The guy comes out of the shower and goes to eat. He sat down at the table. When Faye wanted to start breakfast, he noticed that Lana was offended by him. Faye noticed that the girl's cheeks were puffed up just like a hamster's. Because of this, Faye laughed and blushed. The girl began to be indignant and said that she was not a hamster. There was a lot of delicious food on the table. The guy took everything that caught his eye. Lana decided to talk and asked Faye how he slept. Faye talks about how he dreamed about that very day in the forest when he and Lana met. The girl is more gloomy. Lana leans over and asks what Faye would do if she met one of the Bonets. The boy turns his head away and remains silent. Then he turns back to the girl and says that he will do nothing. Lana asks why the boy would do nothing. She reminds him that he will be able to use his magic powers. 5 years ago, Lana brought Faye to a tree where spirits were flying. The guy tried to make a contract with the spirits, but he never succeeded. That day, Lana approached Faye and said that he had amazing abilities. She said that the fact that he couldn't make a contract with a spirit seemed like a stupid joke to her. Then Lana and Faye hear strange sounds. They turn to the tree and notice a huge number of spirits. The girl is amazed that the boy was able to summon a huge number of higher spirits. Lana then widens her eyes in surprise as she notices 5 more unusual girls in the tree. She couldn't believe that 5 Imperial Beasts appeared right in front of them. She looks from one girl to the other and sees that one of them had red eyes, symbolizing fire, blue eyes symbolizing water, green eyes symbolizing wind, yellow eyes symbolizing thunder, brown eyes symbolizing earth. One of the girls says that they haven't met a strong magician in many years. They all jump off the tree and start circling around Faye. Lana looks at what is happening in shock. Lana remembered the story of how 5 heroes once banished demons to the Dark Continent. Each of them had a contract with only one of the 5 Imperial Beasts. One of the girls reaches out to Faye. At that moment, he realizes that the reason the lower spirits ran away on his birthday was because they were afraid of such a huge magical power. All the spirits hugged Faye. Lana can't believe what's happening. She says that no one has ever been able to make a contract with all 5 Imperial Beasts at once before. The guy interrupts her memories and says that he is glad because he met Lana that day. Lana says it's very sweet. She turns away and says she wants to show the guy something. Faye tenses. The girl puts a brochure in front of the guy. Faye looks at it carefully and notices that it is a brochure for a spiritual school. The girl asks if Faye knows that at the age of 13, everyone must take an entrance exam to a theological school. The girl notices that the guy is tense. He asks what it means. Lana asks him not to worry as he successfully passed the document check. The girl then says that Faye will have to take some kind of test. Faye at this point thinks that if he goes to school, he might meet his sisters and brother there. Lana continues to tell and says that in the spiritual school there is a division into classes. She says that since the guy has contracts with higher spirits, he can easily go to class A if he wants. Faye interrupts the girl and says that it is better to be an ordinary magician. He understands that if someone finds out that he has a contract with the Imperial Spirits, there will be a scandal. Lana asks the boy if he knows about the difference in social status between a regular magician and a spiritualist. Faye replies that he does not know. Lana says that the power of regular magic and spiritual magic is significantly different. The girl points out that the difference in power between a simple magician and a spiritualist is huge. She is convinced that this is why the Bonnets tried to deal with the guy. Faye tenses up. Lana continues and says that a mage can never defeat a spirit mage. She convinces the guy that everyone knows about it. Lana also says that in their time, there is a significant difference in the age of people, among different generations. That is why the status of a magician is significantly inferior to the status of a spiritualist. Lana is going to tell Faye about the class system. To begin with, she says that first graders are divided into 5 classes from A to E. She clarifies that among them, from A to D, are the classes of spiritualists. Lana remembers and says that E is the class of magicians, in which there are 30 people. The girl mentions that there is no limit on the number of spiritualists in a class. She repeats once again that there can only be 30 magicians in a class. Faye says that this way it turns out uneven. Lana continues and says that starting from the second year of study, another class will be added, S. The guy asks what kind of class it is. Lana explains that at the end of the first year there will be a test and only the top 20 candidates will be able to enter this class. Lana convinces the guy that everyone is trying to get into Class S. Faye is surprised and asks why everyone wants to get into this class. Lana explains that those students who graduate from this class will be given the appropriate status. She adds and says that ordinary magicians can also enter this class, but such a case has never happened before. Lana finishes explaining the structure of the spiritual school, and after that, Faye looks away and says that she will study in Class E. The next day, Faye heads to the National School of Spiritual Magic in the Kingdom of Armando. Faye remembered that in each country there is one institution called the spiritual school. The boy approaches the gate and realizes that he has come to the right place. He decides to go further to the main doors. Faye understood that after the demons are destroyed, they can still return again one day, so the country is making every effort to train excellent magicians and spiritualists to strengthen its forces. After completing their studies, there are various paths. You can become a spiritualist of the royal palace or, for example, join the army. Faye came closer and began to look around. He saw a huge number of teenagers who were about to enter the school. Faye walked further, and at some point, he heard that everyone began to discuss someone's arrival. Faye turned around and saw his parents walking next to their children. The boy saw Bram and the sisters. His eyes widened in surprise. His family passed him by without even noticing. Faye couldn't believe that they would meet so quickly. Faye starts squeezing his hands as hard as he can. He tried to reassure himself that they thought he was dead. Faye walked further and started looking for the classroom of Class E. He went inside the classroom, and everyone started looking at him. But after a second, all the students returned to their work. Faye looked at the board and noticed the teacher's message that all students needed to sit in their seats, according to the names written on their desks. When Faye sits down at his desk, a blonde guy comes up to him and says that he has very beautiful black eyes. Faye looks at the boy in confusion. The blonde boy asks him not to misunderstand him. He says he likes beautiful girls. He just wanted to introduce himself. The blonde guy says his name is Gason Downer. He asks to just call him by his first name. Faye continues to look at him, confused. Faye introduces himself and says that Jason can call him by his name too. Then the blonde guy starts to seem to remember something. Faye tenses up. He says that he has heard his name somewhere before, but then decides that he imagined it. The guy blushes and asks if Faye has seen the student council president and his vice president. He says they are very beautiful. A girl comes up to them and says that it is very dangerous. She wondered why all the guys are the same. Jason asked the girl who she was and why she came up to them. He was very angry about her comment. The girl points to herself and says her name is Iris Miri. She was glad to meet you. She only greets Faye. Jason asks why the girl doesn't shake his hand. She makes negative comments about the guy. Faye asks them both to stop. The girl also begins to remember that she has seen the guy somewhere before. Faye turns her head away and says that they all just imagined it. As a child, Faye was often invited to receptions given by the Bonett family. It was there that Iris saw him. Suddenly, Faye heard a familiar voice. Bram and his friend entered Class E and began to speak negatively about him. Jason starts to get angry. He asks what all this means. One of the guys tries to stop Jason, telling him that Bram is from Class A, the best. Jason asks what difference does that make. Faye sits with his hand over his mouth. He was very afraid. Then he heard himself greeting Jason and inviting him to fight him. Iris says that even if they fight, Jason still has no chance of winning. Jason asks if she really thinks he will lose. She says that it is nothing to be ashamed of. Iris then turns around as someone approaches her. Faye looks away, thinking that this is what Lana was talking about. Bram looks at the students of Class E in confusion, and then his friends call him, informing him that their teacher has arrived. Bram realizes that they should all stay put, so he leaves. Jason says that Bram is lucky to have escaped death. Bram just smiles. 6 years ago, Faye's parents were sitting across from each other. The man turned to his wife. She asked what important conversation was coming up. The man says he would like to discuss Faye. He assumes that the woman herself understands that Faye cannot become a spiritualist. The man reminds them that Faye is the eldest son of the Bonett family, so he should become the next head of the family. He says more gloomily that their son is an ordinary magician. The woman, confused, says that someone else can be appointed as the head. She asks if this is not prohibited. She suggests Bram and Cecilia as heirs. The man asks how they will explain this to the Majesty and the other princes, including the Duke's family. He asks if they can say that their son is a simple mage. The woman asks what the man is going to do in that case. He leans over and says that it would be better if Faye never existed. Bram was listening in on this moment. He was very happy with what he heard, although he heard his mother still doubting. Suddenly, a man approached Bram. The boy recognized Armand, who was the head of the Bonett family, on the sideline. Armand was in the Bonett household as a butler. In fact, he was second in influence after the current head of the family. Armand assumes that Bram already understands everything himself. He says that Mr. Alex and everyone else are worried about what to do with Faye. The man asked what Bram himself thought about it. The boy raised his head and asked again. Armand asks what the boy would like to happen to Faye. Bram asks what the man means. The man smiles slyly, then asks if the boy wanted his brother to just disappear. He asks if he could guess. Bram laughs at first, then becomes more serious and says that this is exactly how it is. He wanted Faye to disappear from this world. Armin is pleased with the boy's answer. He leans towards him and tells him what needs to be done to get rid of his brother. The man goes into the parents' room and says that it will be necessary to inform His Majesty that Faye was attacked by a demon and he could not survive the attack. He says that this is a very dangerous way. The parents turn around and see Armand with Bram. They ask what happened. Armand says that if the fairy is banished but left alive, then one day the parents can be accused of lying to the Majesty. Alex agrees. Armand looks at the boy. Bram is sweating with excitement because he understands that now he too needs to say something. Bram says that Faye must simply be gotten rid of once and for all. The parents look at their son in bewilderment. Armand turns to Alex and reminds him that he wanted to get rid of his son. He asks to leave this matter to him. He convinces the man that his best people will do it. Alex tries to say something, but Bram interrupts him and asks if Alex really understands everything. The man's face darkens. Bram continues and says that those who fail to make a contract with a spirit have no future. He asks if this is true. The man closes his eyes and then turns to Armand a few seconds later. He orders him to deal with Faye. Armand looks at Bram with a smile. Then the man looks at Alex and says that he understands him. He promises that everything will be done. A man enters Class E and is the class teacher. He says his name is Aaron Gavel. He reminds them that everyone in their class is a mage. He says that he is also an ordinary mage. Everyone looks at the teacher in confusion but still greets him. The man was about to tell his students something. He says that the principal's policy is to not discriminate between spiritualists and magicians. He goes on to say that even some teachers, let alone students, can be terrible to other students. He asks if his students understand this. The teacher says that every year after the entrance exam, there is always someone who will pick on them. He convinces his students that they should not pick on them even in such cases. He says that if the other side makes the first move, the school rules will be on their side. He asks his students to be patient in order to become stronger. The teacher raises his voice and says that they must become stronger. He asks them to look at their bullies with pride. All the students agree with the teacher. At the age of 7, each child undergoes a ceremony to make a contract with a spirit, and the results of the second contract will affect the rest of his life. Faye recalled how at his ceremony all the spirits simply ran away from him, thereby dooming him to a terrible future. Everyone was discussing this moment in the church. An unheard-of scandal occurred related to the Bonett family because Faye could not make a contract with the spirit. Alex sat across from his wife. He couldn't believe that Faye wouldn't be able to sign the contract. The woman thought that the boy had been disrespectful to his parents. The man says that magicians are significantly inferior to spiritualists. He says that if the next head of the Bonett family is a simple magician, then their family will no longer be in the 7 most influential. The man cursed. Faye recalled strangers trying to kill him with a fire tornado. He also recalled meeting Lana. Faye understood that if his family found out that he was alive, they would definitely come again to deal with him. The guy knew that he couldn't let anyone know the truth. He decided to be very quiet. All the students gathered in a huge hall. The host of the event stood right in front of them. He greeted all the students and congratulated them on their admission to their school. Then the host announced that the director had something important to say. A girl came on stage. At that moment, Iris tried to wake up Jason, who was sleeping. The principal greeted all the first-year students. She announced that her name was Jessica Friel. All the students thought that the child was the principal. They assumed that the girl was 8 years old. Most could not believe that the girl was the principal. The principal asked everyone to be quiet. She said that she was 21 years old, so all the students could rest easy. She convinced the students that she did not have enough magical powers for the Majesty to entrust her with the position. Many in the audience were shocked that the girl was young. Everyone could not believe that the girl was much older than she seemed. The director shows his magic and says that he just has this kind of appearance that nothing can be done about. Discussions about the director's age continued. There were even those who spoke negatively about the girl. The principal stopped abruptly. She hung her head down while everyone else continued to discuss her appearance and age. Another teacher tried to calm her down. The director used the elementary wind magic, the spell Sound Memory. With this spell, she encoded the vibrations of the air with the wind. This magic allows you to preserve the sound of speech. Those who possess this magic usually have some hidden meaning. The principal blushes and shouts that the students should not worry. Everyone immediately falls silent. The principal continues his speech and says that the students have entered an institution for magicians and spiritualists so that they can protect themselves and their loved ones from demons. She asks all students to shed their overconfidence and hone their strength over the next 6 years. Jason walks up to Faye and says he never thought the principal would be some little girl. Faye says Jason is overdoing it. Suddenly, someone addresses Faye. The guy turns around and sees guys asking him to prepare for the document check and entrance exam. Faye remembers Lana convincing the boy that he shouldn't worry because he passed the ID check. Then he remembers his girlfriend saying something about a test. Faye realizes he has to take the test, so he follows right behind the guys who came for him. At that moment, his sister sees him. Faye followed the guys into the building. The one with glasses says that Faye must show the magic he possesses, described in his admission documents. The second guy says that in this way, with the help of the intermediate magic of the 5 attributes and the elemental magic of light and darkness, Faye will have to hit the target. Faye recalled what Lana wrote before intermediate magic. Faye understands that he could actually use high magic right away, but a newbie who entered the school and already had high-level magic would cause too many rumors. Faye uses fire magic Fire Spear. Then the guy uses wind attribute Wind Spear. And the guy also uses lightning attribute Thunder Spear. Then he uses earth attribute Clay Spear and water attribute Water Spear. Faye points his hand forward and fires magic bolts straight at all the targets. The examiners look at the targets in shock. They were amazed by the guy's power, especially since the guys remembered that Faye had just entered. The guy with glasses signs the papers and says he has no questions. He asks Faye to show him how he can master the elementary magic of light and darkness. Faye shows his abilities. The examiners smile and say that the guy passes. Faye remembered that usually, depending on the attribute, there are strengths and weaknesses that vary depending on the power. The examiners were amazed that Faye could not make a spiritual contract. They thought it was something amazing. Faye headed back after passing the exam successfully. He didn't want to be found, so he hurried back. Suddenly, someone's hand reached out towards Faye. The guy turned around and saw a girl who addressed him. She asked if the guy was really called Faye. Faye immediately recognized his girl, whom he had protected from fireballs several years ago. The girl introduced herself and said that her name was Melia Famis. She asked if the guy remembered her. The guy notices a bandage on the girl's arm. He gapes in surprise. Then he overcomes his anxiety and asks if this isn't their first meeting. Melia doesn't understand why the guy is acting so strangely. Faye looks at the girl for a moment and then says that his name is Faye Dirk. He says that she can just call him by his first name. The girl asks what all this means. She asks the guy if he is sure he is not Faye Bonett. Faye pretends to remember the eldest son of the Bonett family. He says that he really did have the same name as him. He asks if he died from a demon attack. Melia cries. She smiles, apologizes, and runs away. Faye returned back to the building. He lay on his bed and thought about Famis, whom he met after passing the test. He realized that he could not tell the girl the truth. Then Faye remembers the director's words about protecting himself and the people he loves. Memories of him saving a girl from an attack by his brother and his friends flashed through his mind. Faye turned around and decided that he couldn't give in to emotions and act stupid just because they knew each other. He assures himself that a lot of time has passed since then. It seems to the guy that Melia was able to become stronger to be able to protect herself. The guy remembers the bandage on his hand again. He turns around on the bed and assumes that she just fell somewhere. He convinces himself that no one was bullying the girl. The guy then looks at his hand and remembers how Lana got hurt a few years ago. At that time, Faye was still a very small boy. He used the power of the 5 beasts and accidentally hurt the girl. She fell to the ground and lay unconscious for some time. Faye was then very scared and ran to Lana. He decided that he would never use the power of the 5 beasts again. It was after this incident that Faye decided that he would live as an ordinary magician. Morning came. Faye winced with displeasure as the sun rays crept into his room. The guy got out of bed and got dressed. And then he went to the exit of the building, having looked at his and Lana's joint photo before that. Faye walked along a busy city street. He saw a huge number of people. The guy walked and thought that he could no longer rely on Lana. He wondered if he could find some part-time work. Faye came to class and immediately sat down at his desk. Iris came into the class and greeted the guy. The guy turned and smiled at the girl. He greeted her too, then he asked where Jason was. The girl said she had no idea. She called the guy a gorilla. Jason came into the classroom and looked at the girl angrily. He asked what Iris had just said. They started arguing again. The guy looks at Jason and Iris and thinks that they are behaving very aggressively. Melia enters the classroom. Faye immediately turns around and notices her. He greets the girl, and she abruptly begins to bow. Iris looks at the girl in confusion. Jason blushes at this point and calls the girl a cutie. He says that Iris has a lot to learn from the girl. Iris gets angry and asks what the guy just said. The class teacher says that their first lesson will be practical. He steps forward so that the students who are lined up can see him. The class teacher says that from now on he will teach them magical skills. The class teacher says that first they will understand the basics of magic and how to control it. Jason looks at his homeroom teacher with disappointment when he talks about magic control. The boy realizes that this is his weak point. Iris leans over and asks if the boy has any strengths. Someone in the line says he doesn't want to do basic magic. He says he wants to do flashy magic. Faye knew that just practicing magic was too casual. He didn't think there would be many people who would enjoy it. The class teacher demands that all the students calm down. He says that all the students only think about increasing their magic rank. He asks if he is really right. The homeroom teacher raises his index finger and explains that magic becomes stronger as you go up in rank. He convinces them that this is both right and wrong. The class teacher adds that magical power is proportional to rank. But if this power is not developed, then the students can be defeated even by lower rank magic. The man assures the students that if they develop impressive magical power through persistent training, then they can even obtain spirit magic. The class teacher clarifies that if the students use too much magical power, they will simply run out of it, which will cause anemia and lack of oxygen. Jason raises his hand and calls upon his magical powers. Iris looks at the boy and says that this is a disgrace. Melia also tried to summon magical power. She realized that it was quite difficult. The class teacher raises his hand and asks the students to try to make the color of their magic power as close to white as possible. The man says that the higher the magic power, the whiter it is. He adds that it works the other way around too. The lower it is, the darker it is. Iris looks at Jason and says that his magic power is completely black. Jason becomes gloomy and curses. He liked the black color of magic power. The class teacher turns his head to the side and notices Fairy, whose magic was white. The man was surprised that Faye had pure and strong magical power. He did not understand how the boy could have such power, being only a first-year student. Everyone, as well as the teacher, were impressed by Faye's abilities. Faye is embarrassed and tense as she realizes that he has attracted attention to himself. Melia looks at the guy with concern. Jason hugs Faye from behind and says that he is a really strong mage. Faye asks what the guy is doing. All the students immediately approached Faye and began asking him how he was able to develop such amazing magical power. They asked the guy to teach them the same. Faye was confused. Faye puts his hands forward and says that he is not doing anything special. The students do not understand what the guy is talking about. Faye says he was extremely upset after failing to make a contract with the spirit, so he trained hard every day. The class teacher asks if the students understand what they need to do. He reminds them again that they need to make every effort. Melia couldn't believe that it wasn't Faye who stood before her, who had once saved her from his brother and his friends. All the students returned back to the classroom. Jason said goodbye to Faye. The boy also said goodbye to him and said that they had a great time. Melia was walking down the school corridor. Some guys appeared behind her. They were looking for a girl. One of the guys asked if this was the same girl. Melia turned around and looked at the guys worriedly. Faye went outside. He suddenly heard the girl's voice screaming and asking him to stop. Faye recognized Melia's voice. He went around the corner where the screams were coming from. He saw Melia sitting on the ground and crying. Next to her, the guy saw Bram. Faye heard the voices of other students from the side who wanted to help the girl, but they did not want to get involved with Bonett. They understood that if they interfered, it would affect their lives. Bram approaches the girl and grabs her by the hair. He asks what is wrong. He says that if she does not resist, something terrible will happen. The girl, crying, said that it hurts. She begs the guy to let her go. Bram smiles and says that in the past, his brother used to bother him at such moments. He feels nostalgic. The guys who stood behind Bram mocked Faye, who tried to fight back against the bullies. They remembered that Faye couldn't even make a contract with a spirit. Melia looks away and says that Faye is not a loser. Bram grabs her hair sharply and demands that she be quiet. Faye looks at the girl worriedly. Faye cursed. He didn't know what to do in this situation. He wanted someone to come and help the girl, but no one could dare to go against Bonett. Faye decided that he shouldn't wait for help and go on his own. But then he began to doubt again, since no one should know who he really was. Faye clenched his hand into a fist. Memories of his birthday, of his family kicking him out of the house, of him running from a fire tornado began to flash through her mind again. Then the boy remembered how he helped Melia. He thinks about the girl and remembers the director's words about him learning magic to protect himself and his loved ones. Melia was sitting on the ground, hugging herself with her arms. At that moment, Bram raised his hand and said that he would throw one fireball at her, after which she would no longer be able to hide anything. Bram's friends supported him. Bram points his hand towards the girl and says that if she doesn't like it, she can try to repel the attack. Melia closes her eyes and waits for the boy to attack. Suddenly, Faye appears right in front of her and asks Bram if he is overstepping his bounds. Bram staggers back in fear. He says that Faye hasn't grown or changed at all. Melia gets up from the ground and looks at the boy who came to save her with tears in her eyes. Faye turns to the girl and apologizes to her. He says that everything will be fine now. Melia. She began to cry with happiness, realizing that she had not been mistaken in the fact that it was the same Faye who had saved her once. Bram angrily asks who Faye is. He asks if the boy really thinks he can just walk away after he got in his way. Faye asks if Bram really doesn't recognize him. He smiles and says that it's been 6 years after all. Bram looks at the boy carefully, and then his eyes widen in surprise as he starts remembering his older brother. He couldn't believe that his brother was still alive. Faye begins to concentrate magic in his hand. He says that Bram still enjoys tormenting the weak. He says that he is ashamed that they were once related. Faye turns to the girl and uses the spell Full Healing on her. Melia notices that all her wounds begin to heal instantly. The observers of the conflict wondered if the boy really used the spell Full Healing. Everyone saw that Faye was a first year, but he already knew how to use such complex spells. Bram was both displeased and amazed. He was dumbfounded that the boy was able to use the highest level of water magic, the spell Full Healing. Melia turns to Faye and thanks him for saving her. The guy is embarrassed because the girl's clothes were very badly torn. He apologizes and hands the girl his jacket so that she can cover herself. Bram looks at his brother, dumbfounded. He turned to his brother, trying to say that Faye was burned. The boy thought that it was all nonsense. He remembers that his father's people completed the task. He is sure that his brother could not have survived. Faye looks at her brother silently. Melia asks what this all means. She says she heard that Faye was defeated in a fight with a demon. Bram's eyes widen as he realizes he has said too much. All the observers began to wonder what was going on. A girl came forward from the crowd of observers. She addressed Faye. Faye looks at Bram and says he understands everything. He says his brother was involved in all this since he knows the details. Faye says the information is correct. He tells of how he was dealt with 6 years ago. He adds that his body was burned. Bram pretends not to understand what his brother is talking about. Melia tries to say something. Faye continues and says that what was actually burned was the highest level magic he created, Dark Doll. Bram screams that this is all nonsense. He says that Faye could not have used this level 6 years ago. Faye says that whether the boy believes or not is his choice. But she points out that at this moment, his living brother is standing right in front of Bram. Behind him, Bram heard the other students marveling at Faye's ability to use high-level synthetic magic. They said it gave them the creeps. Bram cursed. Bram wondered what kind of atmosphere had arisen. He didn't like the fact that everyone started talking only about Faye. He remembers that it had always been like that in their family. Bram was angry because Faye received the most attention and all the parental love. That's why Bram always wished Faye would disappear. Bram turns to Faye and asks why he always saves Melia. He asks if the boy is afraid of what will happen to him when his parents find out he is alive. He says it is a shameful omission. Faye is angry because Bram speaks negatively about the girl. Bram says that if Faye does not want him to get it too, then he should leave the girl and go away. Faye refuses. Faye turns to Brahma and says that he still likes to boost his self-esteem by mocking the weaker ones. Bram started to get angry because of Faye's words. He says that it is not like that at all. He asks if Faye knows that he is in the weak category. Bram starts using magic. Faye looks at his brother in surprise. Both boys throw fiery spears at each other. All the other students were amazed by the clash of magic between the two brothers. Bram is angry that Faye always received love that was not comparable to what he got, and always made an all-knowing face as if it was supposed to be that way. He swears. Bram asks if Faye really thinks the power he received is regular magic. The younger sister watches Bram and can't believe he's about to use one of his most powerful spells. Bram puts his hand to his face and says that Faye has truly beaten him in everything except the one power he's got. Bram summoned a noble spirit. He asked it to show great strength, feeding on its magical power. Faye knew that spirits of lower rank are often shape-shifting spirits. They are docile, easy to handle, and difficult to suppress. He remembered that if a spirit gets out of control, its strength is inferior to a human's. Bram called upon a lower-ranking spirit to incarnate into the flame of a wolf. Bram smiled madly and asked what Faye would do. He mocked the guy for using intermediate magic. He says Faye can sit down if he's scared. Faye notices that his brother treats even the spirit as a thing. Bram at this point says that he is going to show who is really stronger. He uses the spell Fire Needle. Faye responds by raising his hands and casting a spell that causes a wall of water to rise up, protecting him from the fire needles. Bram screamed that his brother was stupid. He was convinced that intermediate magic could never defeat a lower spirit. One of Bram's friends says that it is very dangerous to use spirit magic in a crowded place. He asks if the guy really wants to drag others into his conflict with Faye. Bram shouts that he doesn't care. He says that he's not going to think about the other students because they are weak. Faye thinks that Bram is already tired. He says that the boy has not even reached the intermediate magic of spirits. He asks if Bram has reached the limit of his magical powers. Bram asks what the limit is. He raises his hand, concentrating his magical power, and demands that Faye not look at him as a weak person. Faye first opens her eyes in surprise and then begins to squint. Bram looks at the guy and decides that he has given up. Bram has a bow in his hand. He laughs and is about to launch a fire arrow at the guy. Faye stares into Bram's eyes. He raises his hand and begins to use his magical powers. The boy raises water from the ground. Everyone around was amazed by the boy's abilities. Faye picked up the water and decided to use it as a net. He directed the water net towards Bram, who was looking at his brother with an intense expression. The water net was moving straight towards Bram. After a few seconds, the water net reached its target and began to push it forward. On the way, there were students who were already covering themselves with their hands, afraid that the water net would touch them too. But Faye deftly controlled it so that it went around every student in its path. The water net pushed Bram, causing him to crash into a tree trunk. Faye stood and looked at his brother. Everyone looked at the boys, dumbfounded. Everyone around was amazed at how Faye used the water net so carefully and accurately, which only hit the target. Most of the people around looked at Faye in shock, thinking that he had amazing control over his magic power, especially at such a young age. Even more shocking was the fact that Faye was alive. Everyone thought that the eldest son of the Bonett family had died. Bram stands up and glares at his brother. He decides that he needs to attack the guy again. Bram noticed that his lower spirit was not moving. He looked at the spirit in shock and wondered why it did not attack Faye. Faye says that this is a magic that he created and only he can control it. He used the non-systemic magic elemental control. Faye says that this magic can even stop spirits for a while. Bram screams that such magic cannot be created. Faye says that such magic simply has limitations. Faye says that he can use this magic precisely because he was unable to make a contract with a spirit. He says that it is quite a long explanation. Bram asks what his brother means by this. Faye waves his hand, releasing his magical powers, and asks what is the best thing for him to do. Bram gets up from the ground and asks what Faye is going to do. He says that he is a Bonett, so Faye cannot harm him. Faye says that he is tired of hearing about the Bonett family. Faye uses magic to create a stone ball and throws it straight at her brother. Bram screams and falls to the ground. Faye looks at Bram and hopes that he learned a lesson during their battle. Do not continue to bully the weak. Bram started crawling towards his brother and demanding that he stop. At that moment, a very large stone ball falls on him. The boy loses consciousness. Faye's younger sister comes up to him and apologizes to him. Faye turns around and recognizes Alice's sister. He says that he is no longer her older brother. The girl tries to say something else, but the guy has already left. Faye walked back to the building and went to the shower. He stood under the pressure of the water, thinking about how tired he was after the whole day. Faye walked out of the bathroom and went to bed. He thought about his sister and Melia. He grabbed a pillow and buried his face in it. The guy closes his eyes and decides that he needs to get something to eat because he was so hungry. Then he thinks that he wants to sleep even more, so he puts off the snack. While sleeping, the boy heard a creak and some sound behind the door. Then voices were heard. Faye opened his eyes. The boy looked at his watch and realized that it was still night. He wondered who could have come to him so late. Faye assumed that it was the bandits from the Bonett family. The guy approaches the door and carefully opens it. He sees Melia. The girl blushes and apologizes for coming to him so suddenly. Melia clutches the belt of her bag and asks if she can stay with the guy for the night. Faye looks at the girl in surprise. He asks what happened. The girl answers that it is hard for her to stay in the mansion. Faye asks if the girl is talking about the Bonett house. Melia says that she is talking about it. Melia lived in the Bonett mansion as her Fami's family was a branch of the Bonett family. Faye asks what happened. The girl begins to tell about what happened to Bram. A few hours before, a girl ran out of the crowd and asked what had happened. She went to her sister Alice and asked her to explain. Alice looked at her sister Cecilia and said that the brothers had quarreled. The girl asked again which brothers Alice was talking about. Then she turned her gaze to the side and saw Bram, who was indignant. She was scared because her brother's face was swollen. She asked what happened. The guy answered that nothing happened. On the way home, Cecilia continued to question her brother about what had happened. She tried to stop her brother and find out everything, but he asked her to leave him alone. Then the girl saw Melia and turned to her. She asked what had happened. The girl tried to say something, but Bram ordered her to be silent. Cecilia was very angry with her brother. She went to the girl and put her hand on her shoulder to calm her down. She asked the girl to tell her everything. Melia very uncertainly and quietly answered that Faye was actually alive all this time. Cecilia's parents, Bram and Alice, enter the room. Her father asks if Faye is really alive. Her mother is shocked and also wonders if it is true. Melia confirms this information once again. That evening, everyone who was in the Bonett mansion was divided into two camps. Some were happy to hear the news about their surviving brother, while others, on the contrary, were very angry. Bram says that Faye cast the spell very suddenly. When he noticed it, he immediately covered Alice because she fainted. Melia tries to say that Bram is lying, but the guy interrupts her and says that's exactly what happened. He says that if he hadn't covered for the girl, she could have gotten hurt. Father says it's not strange that Faye is angry. Mother says Bram is a good boy. Bram smiles and asks how he could have done otherwise. Elise looks at her brother with disappointment and says that it was not like that at all. Her father says that Alice should be proud to have such a reliable older brother. The girl tries to explain that everything was not like that at all. Melia turns to Alex and tries to tell him the truth too. The man is silent for a while, then turns his head and asks what the truth really is. Melia couldn't answer. She just burst into tears and decided that the best option would be to leave the mansion. The girl says that this is exactly why she came to the guy. She apologizes. Faye says that there is nothing wrong with that. He asks how the girl found out where he lives. Melia says that Cecilia herself helped her find out. Faye remembers that his sister was the student council president. He asks what Bram is doing. Melia says that when she left, he was resting in his room. Melia wants to say something else, but she can't. Faye notices this and asks what happened. Melia kneels down and bows before the guy. Faye blushes and asks the girl to get up. Melia asks her to forgive her for not being able to tell Alex how it all really happened. She was ready to be punished. Faye refuses to punish the girl. He asks why the girl is acting so strangely. Faye approaches the girl and says that he is not going to reproach her for anything. He convinces her that she has done nothing wrong. The girl tries to say something else, but the guy interrupts her and says that outsiders should not interfere so deeply. The guy is about to say something else, while Melia listens to him attentively. The guy understood that Alex would never side with someone who knows the truth. He is sure that on the contrary they will definitely try to eliminate him in the near future. Melia gets scared and blushes. The guy approaches her and asks if the girl is okay. She apologizes. Faye smiles. Faye asked the girl if he would like some buns. He said he was a little hungry himself. Melia agreed. The girl took a shower and then went to bed. She saw Faye and thanked him for allowing her to use the shower. Faye points to the place where he will sleep, and then says that the girl will sleep on his bed. The girl says that this is wrong, as she has already caused Faye a lot of trouble and hassle. Faye says that he was always taught that girls are not allowed to sleep on the floor. Melia asks if they can sleep together in that case. Faye begins to sweat more from the tension when he hears that the girl is suggesting to sleep together. Melia blushes and says that everything is fine. Faye does not understand what is happening and why the girl is reacting like this. Faye says that it is all a bit strange. The girl assures him that everything is fine. She says that she trusts him. The fairy is confused by the girl's last phrase. He thinks that it is the same as she simply does not see him as a man. Melia says that if Faye sleeps on the floor, then she will sleep on the floor too. Faye says that in that case, it's all pointless. The guy decides that they will sleep in the same bed like childhood friends. He thinks about it exactly like that. The girl looked at the guy and asked what he decided. Faye and Melia ended up sleeping together in bed. The guy was very embarrassed. He thought about how he had gotten used to sleeping like this. He remembers that Lana also sometimes slept in the same bed with him. Faye turned and looked at the girl. She seemed very cute to him, so he smiled. Morning came. The rays of the sun penetrated the room, and the boy closed his eyes. Then he turned his head and saw that Melia was looking at him with a smile and wishing him a good morning. The guy suddenly got out of bed and went to make breakfast. He asked if the girl would also have breakfast. Then Faye and went outside. They saw the consequences of the boy's fight with his brother Bram, a hole in the asphalt and a broken tree. Faye was shocked by the consequences. Melia laughed and said that nothing could be done about it. Faye wonders what he would do if the teacher saw something like this and started scolding him. He thought it would be great if everything could be fixed with magic. Faye and Melia come to class. They notice that there was no one in the class. Faye thinks that they came early. Melia approaches the boy and calls out to him. She hands him a book on the practical application and effective use of low-level magic. The boy blushes and rejoices. Melia remembers how Faye gave her this book. She was only able to use low-level magic, so the guy gave her this book. Faye looks at the girl with a smile and says that she kept the book all this time. He assumes that the girl read it a lot because it is cracked. The girl smiles and says that she kept it because it was a gift from Faye. Faye asks the girl if she wants them to practice magic together like before. The girl claps her hands and says that she really wants to resume their training again. Melia blushed with happiness. She was glad that she and Faye were spending time together again. The guy notices that the girl has blushed, so he asks what happened. The girl doesn't have time to answer because Iris enters the classroom. Iris greets Faye and wishes him a good morning. She turns to the girl and asks how long she and Faye have been talking so nicely. She wonders when they managed to become such close friends. Melia doesn't have time to answer. Jason comes up to Faye and puts his hand on his shoulder. He says that he heard everything. Faye asks what the guy heard. Jason says that he knows what happened the day before. Jason walks away from the boy and marvels at how he beat the older Bonett brother. He was thrilled. He says the whole school is talking about it. Faye at this point recoils and thinks he went too far. Suddenly, Faye realizes that Jason doesn't know who the guy really is. Jason notices the guy's strange look and asks why he's looking at him like that. Faye was wondering at this point why he didn't bring up the fact that he was Bonett. All the other students came into the classroom. They were discussing how Faye had been amazing during the battle with his brother the day before. Faye sheepishly thanked everyone for their compliments. Faye felt relieved, since apparently no one knew anything about his true identity. Jason pokes the guy in the shoulder and asks what's wrong. He says the guy doesn't usually act like this. Faye says he was just lost in thought. The class teacher comes into the classroom. He greets Faye joyfully. He says that the boy is a star. All the students started asking the teacher what had happened to him. The man was happy that the magician had defeated the spiritualist. This had happened for the first time in history. He asked if this was a miracle. His dream had finally come true. Faye was tense. He was not an ordinary magician, so he did not share the man's delight. Faye assumed that their homeroom teacher would be disappointed in him if he knew that he actually had a contract with the Imperial Spirits. The homeroom teacher noticed the boy's puzzled face and asked what was wrong. Faye replied that nothing was wrong. He assured the teacher that he was just thinking about being scolded. He felt better. Suddenly, the class teacher remembers that the boy was called by the principal. He demanded that the boy go to the principal's office immediately. The boy suspected that they would not let him go so easily. Faye walked to the principal's office with his head down. He began to worry again. He assumed that they would demand that he reimburse the money for the repairs. He thought about how to tell Lana about this later. Faye approaches the right door and stops. He hesitates for a while and then finally decides to knock. A voice immediately sounds from behind the door, asking the visitor to come in. The headmistress sat at a desk in the middle of the room, waiting for Faye to come in. She looked up and asked if the boy's name was really Faye. The headmistress introduced herself by giving her first and last name Jessica Friel. The boy at that moment confirmed that his name was Faye. The headmistress asks if the boy knows why she invited him to the office. Faye assumes it's because of the fight between him and Bram that happened the day before. She says she wanted to discuss something about it. The woman asks the boy if he knows that their fight left a huge hole in the foundation of the school. The boy says he does. He asks if he should pay for the repairs. The director says there is no need for compensation. She says there is something else besides that. The woman claims that the students who were present the day before during the conflict heard the boy mention many times that he is Faye Bonett. She would like to hear from the boy what it means. Faye frowns. The woman notices and asks what's wrong. The guy says he's the former eldest son of the Bonett family. The woman closes her eyes and says she understands. She asks if it's true that the boy was kicked out of his family and bandits were sent after him to cover up all traces. Faye says that's exactly what happened. Faye asks if it was really the woman who made sure no one said anything about this. The principal says that it was indeed she who stopped any discussion of the topic. She did not want to cause unnecessary confusion, as it is more convenient for adults. Faye looks at the woman in surprise. She notices his gaze and asks what's wrong. The woman blushes, then frowns. Faye thinks she looks like a hurt child, so he blushes too. The director says that she will report Bram and Faye's conflict to His Majesty the King. But even despite what happened a day ago, she does not think that there will be any punishment. The director says that the Bonett family are famous people, considered the highest power in the country. She says that it is assumed that it is much wiser to deal with money matters than to punish unnecessarily and wait for betrayal. Faye agrees with the woman's statement. Then she goes on and says that on the other hand, not acting will also lead to a loss of authority. She thinks that it will be limited to confiscation of land. Faye says that all this is enough. He does not deny that he himself responded to the provocation a day ago and himself provoked an even greater conflict. The woman says that the fall of the Bonets, who only terrify their citizens, is a matter of time. Faye says that he thinks so too. The woman then tells the boy to forget everything she said a few seconds ago. Faye asks if that's all the headmistress wanted to talk about. The woman says there's something else they need to discuss. The boy asks what it is. Jessica talks about elemental control. Faye looks at the woman in surprise. The woman says that this magic temporarily completely controls the spirits and blocks their movements. She heard that only Faye can control such magic. She asks what the principle is. Faye says she can't answer. Jessica asks why. She asks if it would hurt anyone if they knew about this magic. The guy looks away and can't answer. His jaw is clenched with tension. Jessica asks why he can't tell. Faye understood that even if he explained the principle of how magic worked, no one would be able to use it anyway. He remembered that there were some conditions for using this magic, but if he told about it, he might be suspected of using the 5 Imperial Beasts. He couldn't allow that. The headmistress says that she understands everything. She says that the fact that an ordinary magician defeated a spiritualist can change a lot in the minds of other students. She dreamed of this, so she thanks the guy. Faye says he doesn't deserve gratitude. He says he defeated Bram only on a whim. The woman looks at the guy in shock. Faye asks what's wrong. She replies that everything is fine. The woman thought that at such a young age, Faye was acting very mature. She had no idea what the boy had to deal with. She wondered what was going on in his head. Faye goes to the exit and says she will go. Suddenly, he notices a bookcase and books about appearance. The guy did not understand why a woman would need such books since he considered her quite attractive. The woman did not understand anything. Faye returned to class, where the class teacher was dancing at the blackboard, and all the students were looking at him in bewilderment. Jason tells Faye that he was gone for a long time. He asks what the guy talked about with the principal. Faye says he'll tell everyone in the cafeteria. Faye goes to the cafeteria after school. When he took the tray and headed to the table, Melia stopped him and said that he forgot his fork. The guy thanked the girl. Iris looked at the guy and the girl with suspicion. When everyone sat down at the table, Iris asked why Melia addressed Faye as a superior person. Faye answers for the girl and says that it is an old story. He agrees that the girl is right. Then he turns to Melia and says that things have changed so she can address him as her peer. Melia doesn't understand what the guy is talking about. Faye continues and says that it's very strange to treat a classmate as a superior. He suggests that the girl remove all formal and polite speech. Melia is confused. The girl bows her head and blushes, thinking about how she will communicate with Faye as if he were a normal classmate. Iris smiles slyly, watching the girl. Suddenly, someone's hand falls on Faye's shoulder. He turns around and sees his sister Cecilia. The girl introduces herself by stating her name and status. She says that she would like to talk to him. She asks if the boy can come to the student council office. Faye asks what if he doesn't want to go into the student council office. Cecilia asks the boy to come into the office again. The boy finally agrees and follows his sister to the student council office. He doesn't know what to expect from his sister. Faye's older sister comes up to him and introduces herself. She says that she is the vice president of the student council. The girl asks the guy if he can come to her office. The boy was sitting in the student council office. He was very tense. Faye wanted to get it over with as quickly as possible, so he asked why Cecilia had invited him to the office. The girl was pouring tea at that moment. Cecilia said that the president asked her to call him to this office. The girl says that the director will tell her the details herself. Cecilia claims that the director should come soon. The girl places a tray of cups on the table. Faye takes one cup and looks at the girl intently. Then the guy looks away and tries the tea. He asks why the girl was looking at him like that. Cecilia also looked worried. She asked if the guy would answer one of her questions. Faye puts her cup on the table and asks if this question is from the student council vice president. The girl looks at the guy in surprise. Then she blushes and asks what if the question is from Cecilia Bonett's perspective. Faye is silent for a while, folding his arms, and then says that he has no desire to answer the girl's questions. Faye says that he only came to the girl because the vice president called him. He assures the girl that there is no hidden meaning. Cecilia lowers her head and crumples the fabric of her skirt. She says that in that case she will ask as vice president. Faye looks away and thinks about the girl abusing her power. Cecilia asks why the boy went to the seminary. She wonders if he did it to meet Cecilia, Alice, and Bram. Faye turns her gaze back to the girl and asks why he wants to meet them. Cecilia asks if the guy has come to take revenge on them. Faye says he has no intention of taking revenge. He claims that a friend simply advised him to go. Faye claims that the Bonets are now just another noble family for him. The girl understands everything in her own way and asks if this means that Faye has forgiven their family. Faye looks at the girl, dumbfounded. He smirks and wonders if the girl got something wrong. He can't believe the girl would think something like that. Faye clenches her hand into a fist and then, looking menacingly at Cecilia, asks if she seriously thinks he can forgive their entire family. Cecilia looks at the guy with horror in her eyes. Faye says he doesn't care about his old family, so he won't take revenge on them. That's enough reason for him. He doesn't want to have anything to do with them anymore. Faye says that his parents were only touched when the boy became stronger. He was very happy, so he tried harder. That is why the boy did not notice that they loved not him, but the strength that he possessed. This was a good lesson for Faye, as he realized that people are ugly, especially those who try the hardest to look cute. Now he is sure that there is no other choice to protect yourself but to sacrifice yourself, even if it is family. This is what the Bonets taught him. He is grateful to them for the lesson. Cecilia stands up and asks how Faye can talk about their family like that. Faye says the girl is exactly the same. He points out that she, without first apologizing, asked if he could forgive them. Cecilia looks at her brother in shock. Faye says he met someone who proved to him that not all people are the same. He says he met someone kinder than his family. Cecilia looks down and blushes. A girl walks into the office, rubbing the back of her head and apologizing for being late. Faye turns and looks at the girl, and Cecilia lowers her gaze. The girl pretends to ask why the atmosphere in the room is so gloomy. She asks if Cecilia wants to go back to class. Faye remains silent, and Cecilia thanks the girl and goes back to class. The girl says that she and Faye haven't seen each other for a long time. She gives her name Layla Merritt. She asks if the guy remembers her. Faye recalls that the Merritt family, like the Bonets, were among the 7 richest families in Armando. They were among the most influential and wealthy people. About 10 years ago, Duke Merritt was promoted to Marquis, after which their family became one of the most influential in the kingdom. Faye says he remembers the girl. He asks why she wanted to meet him. The girl says there were 2 reasons why she called him. The first reason is that the girl wanted Faye to meet Cecilia. The guy gets angry. Then Layla says that the second reason was that she needed him. Faye asks what all this means. Layla thinks that the guy is thinking about something wrong. She raises her hand, points it at the guy and says that she wants to invite him to the student council. Faye immediately refuses. The girl asks why the guy refuses. She reminds him that he defeated the elder Bonett Brum who showed great promise. She is convinced that the boy is the hope of all mages. Faye is embarrassed and looks away. He tries to say something, but the girl says that it is not like that at all. Faye says that during their conflict, Bram simply wasn't cool. He convinces the girl that Bram is very immature, which is why he was easy to defeat. Layla says she knows everything. She winks at the boy and says he can decide to join the student council a little later. Faye asks what that means. The girl says that the guy is right about the fact that if a freshman suddenly joins the student council, it will not be very nice in relation to the senior students. That's why they decided to form a student organization. Faye asks what all this means. He says he's never heard of anything like it. Layla says she got the director's approval this morning. Faye asks how she could get approval so quickly. Faye asks what exactly their organization is for. The girl corrects him and says that they organize it for a specific target group. Layla says that after a year of experience, Faye will be able to officially join the student body next year. Faye sarcastically says that he can't wait. Faye continues and says that school lasts for 6 years. He asks what will change if he joins the student body next year. Layla tells that Cecilia became vice president already in her 3rd year. She notices that the guy is not listening to her and asks if he is really not interested. Faye is silent for a while. Layla says that if Faye joins the student council, then maybe the status of magicians in the school will increase a little. Faye's eyes widen in surprise. Faye continues and says that perhaps his classmate Melia Famies will be less subject to ridicule. Layla understands that Faye wants to express his inner protest. Faye realizes that by joining the student council, he will definitely become too close to the Bonets, starting with Cecilia. Faye refuses. Layla frowns and says that the guy is very stubborn. She thinks that the guy has many shortcomings. Layla looks at the guy and then sighs. Faye notices and says that he has a reason for refusing. He says that he no longer wants to be associated with the Bonett family. Faye looks away and says that joining the student organization, as much as he would like to, will not be able to isolate him from the Bonnets. Faye mentions that the girl wanted to meet him. He asks why. He says that it caused him problems that he was trying to avoid. He was very angry about it. Layla looks at the boy startled. She asks if the boy also talks to Cecilia. Faye looks away and asks what the difference is. He places the cup on the tray with dishes. At this point, Layla says that she still wants Faye. Layla says that if the boy joins the student council, she will take 2 more mages into the organization, which the boy chooses. Faye asks what the point is. Layla says that the maximum number of members in the organization is 6 people. Thus, if there are 3 mages including Faye, then there will be 3 spiritualists. Therefore, their influence in the student council will be equal. Faye thinks and asks if he can ask the girl a question. Layla listens to him attentively. Faye asks if the student council really consists of the strongest students. He says that it won't be easy to take so many mages. Layla says it will be fine. She is going to insist that the 3 spots be given to the mages. Faye asks if he can choose anyone. Layla replies that he will be able to choose those who have high abilities for office work. Faye asks if it's true that not everyone can join the student council. Layla says that it will be decided next year. The guy closes his eyes and thinks. Then his eyes widen as he sees Layla folding her hands and asking him to join the student council. Faye finally agrees. The girl screams with delight. She says that in that case the guy will have to bring 2 more tomorrow after school. Faye sharply asks why he only has a day. Layla says they don't have time. Faye agrees and says that it is time for him to go. Layla stops the guy right at the door. She puts her hand on his shoulder. The guy turns around and stares at the girl. Layla asks to listen to her and asks Faye to talk to Cecilia. Faye looks at the girl in surprise and then asks why the girl is so rudely interfering in their personal life. Faye left. He was going to meet his friends at a place. When the guy came to the right place, Melia called out to him. She immediately smiled and said that they had been waiting for the guy all this time. The boy walked up to the table and heard Jason complaining about how they already had a test on non-systematic body enchantment magic next week. Iris said that was why they needed to come up with a strategy. Faye approaches the table and notices the huge amount of delicious food. He blushes and is surprised that his friends have already ordered food. Melia laughs at Faye for not being able to resist sweets again. Ari and Jason are surprised. They couldn't imagine that Faye loves sweets. They watch the boy enjoy the sweet dishes. Iris and Jason laughed. At this time, Cecilia returns home. Bram approaches her and asks what happened. Cecilia says that she wants Alice and Bram to join the student organization at the student council. Alice asks why. Cecilia says that after working for a year in this organization, they will be able to get a place in the student council. She says that she cannot say this with certainty, but they will definitely have some privileges. Bram assumes that the girl wants to have great people like him on the student council as soon as possible. Bram knew that there were some problems for freshmen to join. He assumes that is why they came up with this plan. Cecilia looks away. She says that in any case she will be waiting for them in the student council office the next day. She asks if her sister and brother understood everything. Alice asks if she is sure she will fit in. Cecilia walks up to her sister, kneels down in front of her, and tells her that she needs to be more confident. She reminds her that she is in the strongest class of freshmen. Iris stood in front of Jason. The girl suggested that they begin training. She told the guy that he needed to try and release all the magical power from the center of his body. The guy releases a magical force and asks the girl if he is doing everything right. Iris says that everything is wrong. Jason raises his hands and asks what is the right way then. Iris laughs and says that the guy has no inner feeling at all. Jason is outraged and asks how he is supposed to succeed if the girl constantly comments on everything. Iris asks what the guy just said. Jason says the girl is a terrible teacher. Faye and Melia approach them. Faye was surprised that Jason and Iris had been training since the morning. Melia simply greeted his classmates. Jason and Iris also greeted the boy and girl. Jason adds that they don't have much time. Faye turns to the girl and invites her to practice too. He asks what level she has reached. Melia decides to show. The girl points her hand forward and releases magical powers. Faye is amazed that the girl can already release magical power from 3 fingers. The girl remembered that 6 years ago, she could only release magical power from her thumb. Faye looks at the girl and smiles. He thinks about how she trained every day. He noticed that the girl's magic power was a little cloudy, but its purity was very high. The guy distantly hears Iris yelling at Jason. She asks how much he needs to explain before he understands. Faye then looks at Iris and notices that the purity of her magical power is still not very low, but she can control it with ease. Faye approaches Melia and asks her to give her hands. The girl is embarrassed but still holds out her hands. The guy squeezes the girl's hands in his. Iris blushed and screamed, asking what Melia and Faye were doing. Jason blushed too and said that they shouldn't flirt in class. Faye says that they got it all wrong. Faye says that he will release his magical power little by little, allowing it to flow smoothly into Melia. He asked the girl to try to slowly merge with the flow. He asked if the girl understood everything. She agreed. Faye and Melia join hands. Their bodies are enveloped in magic. Iris' eyes sparkle and she says it's amazing. She says she's never seen such beautiful magic power. Jason blushes and says that he has never seen such sensual power either. Iris then strikes him and continues to watch the magical power of her classmates. Melia looks at her hands and thinks that Fairy's magic power is amazing. She felt the power flowing through her body at a constant speed. She planned to direct her power along the path of Fairy's magic power. The guy was very surprised, as the girl stretched her hand forward and was able to release magic from 5 fingers. The girl shouts to Faye that she succeeded. She was delighted. Faye began to congratulate the girl. He says that if this continues, then in a week she will be able to use magic that allows her to enchant her body. Jason at this point says he wants to sleep. Then Iris remembers that the guy came even earlier than her and asks if he is okay. She doesn't remember the guy ever coming so early. Jason turns to the girl and pointing his thumb at himself says that he should not be underestimated. He had a countermeasure. Iris asked what kind of countermeasure it was. The guy said that he would just sleep in class. He thinks that would be enough. Iris says that Jason always sleeps in class, so nothing will change. Jason laughs and says that he can understand Aaron's lessons easily even in his sleep. Suddenly, a male voice is heard asking if everything is really as Jason said. Jason's face darkens and he stops laughing. The class teacher asks if the boy really should have the highest score on the test in that case. The class teacher approaches Jason and grabs him by the shoulder when the boy tries to leave, citing a sudden business that has come up. Jason says that it is time for him to return to class, and the class teacher demands that he stop. The class teacher looks at the boy angrily and says that if he doesn't get the highest score on the next test, he will give him a special extra lesson after school. After training, Jason suggested that Faye go and get something to eat. The guy said that he needed to go to the student council, so he declined. Faye approached the student council office. He remembered the girl's words about him having to choose 2 mages. He assumed that Layla would not be in the office since it was lunch. The guy decides to sort this out and knocks on the door. He goes inside and sees a girl. Layla laughs and says that Faye came late. The guy asks if the girl really knew that he was coming. Layla replies that she did. Layla points to the list of students and asks if the guy really came to look at it. Faye replies that he wanted to study the list. Layla laughs and asks how he can choose someone when he just entered school. She laughs. At this point, Faye thought that if the girl herself understands this, then why did she make him choose? Layla smiles and asks if she can say something. She says that the boy could have chosen one of his classmates. She asks if the boy has thought about it. He hasn't gotten to know everyone well yet. Layla says that the boy is always too serious in rather strange places. She says that if the boy starts thinking about the mages he will choose now, he will not make it in time for the end of classes. Faye is about to say something else, but Layla interrupts him and asks if she can do it for him. Faye asks if the girl really wants to do it. Layla says that most of the information about students is stored in her head. She tells the boy not to worry and says that she would never choose someone who could be at a disadvantage to the spiritualists. Faye asks if he can rely on her in that case. The girl replies that he can rely on her. Layla claps her hands and says that the dinner is not over yet. She asks if the guy wants to have dinner with her. Faye declines and says that she prefers to have dinner in a pleasant environment, which is why he says no. Faye goes to the door and says he's going. Layla gets upset with him and says they'll meet again after school. There was a ruckus. Bram was asking where Faye was. Everyone was asking him what he was doing and why he was shouting at the top of his lungs. Alice tried to calm her brother down, but he wouldn't listen. Bram grabbed Jason by the collar and was about to hit him, but then suddenly he heard Bram's voice. Bram came into the dining room and sat at the table with the girls. He asked what happened. Iris looked at Bram and also wondered why Bram was acting so aggressively. Jason looked at his friend and shouted his name happily. Bram was still holding him by the collar. He turned his head and glared at his brother. Jason approaches Faye and asks him to do something about his brother. Bram asks why Jason is being so disrespectful to him. Iris intervenes and yells that everyone is tired of listening to them. Faye looks at Bram and asks what's wrong. He says the guy is a spiritualist, then he asks why he can't manifest his spirit. Bram approaches Faye and says he can do it easily. Faye asks what's wrong then. He says Bram irritates him. Bram laughs and says that now is the perfect time to break some important news. He tells them that he has joined the student council. Faye turns around and looks at his brother without interest. Bram has no idea what to do. Bram says that in fact it is still a student organization under the student council, but it was created especially for him so that he could officially join it. Faye still answered without interest. Bram raises his index finger and says that the members of this organization can decide for themselves when to release a spirit or anything else. He assures the boy that no matter what he does to Faye, nothing will happen to him for it. Faye says the opposite. He is sure that in the worst-case scenario, Bram could be stripped of his qualifications. He reminds us that a similar problem has already arisen with Bram. Alice approaches the boy and takes him away. Bram continues and says that he will not do anything to Faye for now, but promises to deal with him in a day. Faye looks at his brother and sister as they leave. It seems to him that his brother has not yet fully recovered. Faye realizes that Bram will also join the student council organization. He doesn't like this idea even more now. In the kingdom, 3 dukes bow directly before their majesty. One of the dukes says that they cannot allow even the members of the 7 to do whatever they want. He thinks it is impossible. The second duke says that if you punish the guilty member of the 7, then a rebellion will definitely break out. The third duke believes that if they punish him too lightly, people will think that his majesty is afraid. The third duke also convinces everyone that after such a thing, not only will his majesty no longer be respected, but his reputation will also be ruined. One of the dukes turns to the man sitting on the throne and asks what orders he will give regarding the Bonett family. At this time, Faye returned to the classroom. A girl immediately approached him and was happy that the guy had returned. Faye interrupted her and said that after class he would need to go somewhere else. He asked the girl to return to the building first and handed her the keys. Melia says that the guy doesn't have to worry about her. She convinces him that she will just wait. Faye raises his hand and refuses. He is afraid that his conversation with Layla will drag on for a long time. As much as he wants to end it quickly, he cannot make the girl wait for him for so long. Faye approaches the door of the student council and thinks about how Bram is causing him a lot of trouble. He knocks on the door and hears a girl's voice asking him to come in. Faye goes inside and notices that in the student council, besides him and Layla, there was Cecilia and 2 students he didn't know. Layla smiles and says they were waiting for a guy. Faye asks if he's late. Layla winks and replies that the guy came on time. She claims that she was just waiting impatiently for the guy all this time. Cecilia asks the boy to pay attention to 2 magicians carefully selected by the president. The guy introduces himself and gives his first and last name, Graham Nelson. He says he is a second-year student. He is glad to meet them. There was a girl sitting to his right. She also introduced herself, saying that her name was Celia Riley. She said that she was also a sophomore. He was pleased to meet the guy. Faye also introduces herself and bows. Graham says he knows Faye, The guy, confused, asks what that means. Graham talks about how he and Celia saw the conflict outside the school. They never thought they would see a magician defeat a spiritualist. He was thrilled. Faye understands what the guy is talking about. Celia adds and says that they are from Bonett territory. Faye asks what the girl means. Graham says that they generally understand Faye's situation, but they are forbidden to say anything, so they ask the guy not to worry. Faye looks at Graham and Celia in confusion. He thanks them hesitantly. He had his doubts about the new members of the student organization. Layla turns and asks what's wrong with Brahm. She says that many people are late. Graham jumps up and asks if Brahm is really going to join the student organization too. Layla says yes. Faye thought about how Graham could call the son of a high-ranking official so familiarly. It seemed abnormal to him. Faye looks away and thinks that it is not very important. Graham turns and asks if the girl knows what Brahm did. Layla says that other students and teachers recommended the boy. Layla says that the student council is where real magical abilities play a major role, so Brahm won't be able to make any claims in this place. Faye looks at the tense Graham and Celia. He understands that it is difficult for them, as mages, to interact with a spiritualist, especially one like Brahm. Faye feels this difference between mages and spiritualists every time. Brahm turns and looks at Faye, thinking that he might be their only hope. Graham asks Faye to contact him immediately if there is a problem. He says that even if the guy thinks that nothing can be done about it, Graham will still come up with something. Celia supports him. Faye looks at the boys, then smiles and thanks them. He was glad that he found loyal comrades. A girl comes into the office and apologizes for being late. She says it's nice to meet everyone. She then introduces herself and says her name is Eunice Cessna. She is a second-year student. Faye looks at the girl and realizes that all three of them are gathered. He assumes that Eunice is a spirit mage. Eunice bows and says that she is pleased to meet everyone. Faye, Graham, and Celia introduce themselves. Faye looks at Eunice and notices that she is not acting arrogant. He thinks so. Eunice notices the guy's look and asks what's wrong. Faye says that everything is fine. Faye hears Bram's voice, so she immediately tenses up. Bram and Alice enter. Bram kicks the door and apologizes. Alice enters and quietly apologizes. Bram is happy that the student council president is already there. Bram sees Faye and asks what he is doing at the student council. Faye looks away and blushes. Alice notices her brother. She asks if her brother really joined the student council organization too. Faye replies that he did join their student organization. He reminds them that he is no longer their brother. Bram screams in anger. Bram points his hand at Faye and curses. He asks why he, being an ordinary magician, joined the student organization. Layla smiles and asks if she said that. She tells him that there will also be 3 mages in their student organization. Bram gets even angrier. Bram says he's totally against it. He asks why a student organization for the strongest needs regular mages. Graham slams his hand on the table and asks what the guy said. Layla pretends to be shocked by what Bram says. She says that if the mages are weak, then that means Bram lost to one of the weak mages. Bram starts making excuses and says that he was caught off guard. Layla says that even if the guy was caught off guard, it was still his real level of magical abilities. Bram raises his fist and swings it. He shouts that he is against it. Then he is about to hit Faye. Faye looks at the guy in confusion. Graham appears right in front of him, covering Faye with his body and intercepting Bram's fist. Bram asks who Graham is. He demands that he let go of his hand. Graham refuses. He says that he can't just stand by and watch his comrade get attacked. Bram is surprised when he hears about his comrade. He asks if Graham is really a mage too. Graham says that is the correct answer. Graham starts screaming that he is in pain. Graham lets Bram go. Faye thanks the guy at this point, and Graham asks the guy not to worry about it. Bram falls. Alice approaches him and asks if her brother is okay. Bram demands that the girl be quiet. Graham approaches Abram and tells him that he is being terrible to his older brother. Bram yells that Faye is just a stranger to him. Graham frowns and says that he hates horrible people like Bram. He says that if Bram touches Faye, he will never forgive him. Faye's eyes widen when she hears Graham's words. Bram raises his index finger and points it at Graham. He says that this is the Bonnett's problem, so Graham should not get involved. Graham says that he was able to defeat Bram in just a second. Bram gets angry and demands that the boy shut up. A drop of water falls on Bram, and then a whole stream of water pours down on him from above. The guy falls silent. Everyone turns around and notices that Layla was standing with her hand outstretched. She says that she will not allow such stupidity again. Bram apologizes and says he's just losing his temper. He looks at Faye, who is smiling tensely, and starts to get angry again. Bram approaches the student council president and says that he heard that the school has a tradition of dueling between students. He asks to be allowed to duel Faye. Layla says that such duels used to be held often. Bram shouts that he was right. Bram points at Faye and asks what he thinks about this. Faye asks what it all means. Bram says that the guy will definitely lose next time. He asks if the guy is afraid of him. Bram looks at Faye with a smile. Faye looks away and says he agrees to a duel. Layla says that in that case they will meet at practical training. Alice pushes the guy to the exit. The guy finally says that he will definitely defeat Faye this time. He says that Faye should not even think about running away. Cecilia looks at what is happening in shock. Graham approaches the president and asks if Layla will really let Bram join the student organization. The girl says that the guy doesn't always act like that. Graham asks what that means. Layla sits down at her desk and says that the others have barely seen the other side of Bram. Graham still doesn't understand what the student council president means. Layla turns to the boy and says that Bram is quite strong, but he does not go up against people of higher rank. However, he completely lost control in front of Faye. Layla says that's why she wants them both within her reach. She says that no one is forcing them to join the student council next year. Faye asks if that's why Layla was so desperate to ask him to agree. Layla says she knows it's not very kind to Faye, but that's what she had in mind. Layla sighed and said that she thought it would help remove the Bonett's darkness a little. Faye blushed and was glad that the girl actually thought of something like that. Faye thought that Layla was just a girl in good shape. Layla thought that the guy thought of something indecent. Faye left the student council and wondered if Melia was waiting for him. He walked into the classroom and saw the girl. He realized that she was waiting for him after all. Melia happily shouted out the guy's name. Melia runs up to the guy and asks if he was able to settle all his affairs. Faye looks away and says that he still has some unresolved issues. Faye looks down and blushes. Melia asks what happened. Faye says he needs a little more time. The guy asks the girl to go back first. Melia says she will go with the guy anyway. She says there is no point in going back to the classroom again. Faye refuses and tries to explain to the girl that she should go back alone, but Melia does not listen to the guy and says she will go with him. In the end, Faye agrees. Faye and Melia head to the duel together. Faye and Melia arrive at the practice room. Faye sees Jason and Bram holding each other by the collars, and Alice and Iris standing to the side. Jason immediately greets Faye happily. Faye turns to Jason and Iris asking what they are doing in a duel. They reply that they were practicing body enchantment. They ask what Faye and Melia are going to do. Faye was a little confused, so he didn't have time to answer the question. Iris answers for him and says that there will be a duel between Bram and Faye. That's why they needed a room for practical training. Iris joins in and asks what kind of duel this is. Faye replies that it's a normal one. Iris is taken aback by the guy's answer. Faye says that they're taking the practice room anyway. Jason sighs. Faye looks away and apologizes for interrupting the boys' training. Jason says it's no big deal. He says they'll just check the safety of the practice room for now. Bram and Faye stand opposite each other. Layla announces that the duel will continue until one of them admits defeat. Layla says that the boys can use recovery magic, but they are responsible for every injury, so she asked them to act moderately. Bram thinks about the words about injuries. Layla announces the start of the duel. Bram shouts that the first victory will be his and launches fireballs at Faye. Faye dodges and tries to enchant the body. Jason says that Faye's magic is beautiful. Melia is happy and says that it is what you would expect from a guy. Jason turns to the girl and asks if she is worried. Melia smiles and says that Faye can't lose. Bram smiles and says that after all, lower-level magic doesn't work on the guy. Faye says that Bram won't be able to defeat him unless he uses at least higher-level magic. Bram smiles and asks if the boy really wants to see him use high-level magic. He starts using high-level magic. Bram used high-level fire magic. A wave of flames moves towards Faye. He widens his eyes in surprise. Faye was amazed that his brother used the spell without any preparatory movement and even without chanting. Faye decided to use the water net to hide from Bram's attacks. The boys' magical powers collided with each other. Everyone was stunned by the steam. Faye swears. All the magic evaporates. Faye looks menacingly at Bram, realizing that they are tied. Bram laughs and says he will never accept a draw. Faye realizes that this is not the end. He sees that Bram is using high-level magic without any warning signs. Layla says that even the student council staff finds it difficult to use magic without chanting, much less high-level magic. She says that it's simply impossible. Jason asks if that's true. Layla suspects that Faye will have a hard time dealing with something like this. Faye uses the water net again. He sees Bram throw a fire spear at him. Faye raises a wall of water and defends himself from the fire spear. The guy understood that Bram had suddenly attacked him, assuming that he would be scared. But he firmly decided that the guy would not wait for this. Faye thought it was strange considering there was absolutely no prerequisite for using the advanced magic flame wave. Faye knew that there were warning signs before using Fire Lance. and intermediate magic. Faye looks at Bram and sees that he is smiling. The guy did not understand what was happening. He saw what Bram used besides basic magic, high-level magic and spirit magic. He doesn't understand why the guy doesn't look tired. Faye begins to guess what is really going on. He listens. And then, when Bram attacks him again with fire magic, he puts up a wall of water in front of him. Faye senses someone behind him, so he turns around. Bram yells, bad-mouthing the guy. Faye sees a wolf spirit behind her. All the observers are afraid for the boy. Faye raises her hands and begins to use wind magic and water magic. The flow of water carries away the spirit. Bram doesn't have time to dodge the wind flow. He just opens his eyes wide in surprise and then falls and flies a huge distance. Everyone was amazed by the fight. Bram gets up and curses. Layla looks at Faye in amazement and says that he really is a magician, which makes you shudder. Faye approaches Bram and asks if he really used Aaron's crystal. He asks if it is true. Faye knew that the Aaron crystal was a rare precious crystal that had the ability to store magic. By using even the simplest magic, the magical power stored in it will be released, giving the owner of the crystal a powerful force. Since this crystal is very rare, only the royal family or the aristocrats closest to it can own it. Bram gets up from the ground and asks what difference this makes. He asks where it says that crystals can't be used in a duel. Faye sighs and asks why the boy wouldn't want to fight with his power. Bram says his power is financial might. He convinces the guy that his power is money, intelligence, ability. Faye asks if he can ask the guy something. Bram folds his arms and asks what he is wondering. Bram asks whose magic is stored in the crystal. Bram smiles and says that the magic in the crystal belongs to their father. Faye remembers the very moment his father called him into his office and told him he was being kicked out of the house. Faye lowers his head and thinks that by surpassing the magic of Aaron's crystal, he will be able to defeat his father. The boy understands that somewhere deep in his chest there is still a feeling that he tried to get rid of. He tried to forget about this feeling, but he began to understand that the bitterness is stronger than him. Faye began to feel that he wanted to deal with his family who abandoned him. He wanted them to be on their knees and beg him for mercy. Bram was scared as powerful magic began to envelop the boy. Faye at this point said that it was time for them to end all of this. He demands that Bram show him his father's power. Bram is scared at first, but then he concentrates and asks why Faye is pretending to be so strong and serious. Bram uses the fire net spell again. He was going to defeat the guy with the flames of fire. Bram then materializes a bow in his hands and is about to shoot a fiery arrow at Faye. At this moment, Jason and Melia shout for Faye. Faye lowered his head again and remembered his birthday in church. Remembered how his father demanded that he leave their house and never cross the threshold again. Then the guy's head began to flash with scenes where he tried to escape from bandits and a fire tornado. Faye thought again that defeating the magical power of Aaron's crystal was the same as defeating his father. Faye decided that he would completely destroy all his offenders. He raised his hand sharply and called forth a wind whirlwind. Bram smiled and shot a fiery arrow, but the wind whirlwind swallowed the arrow and continued moving towards the boy. Bram tensed up. The practice room was silent, as everyone looked at the results of the fight between Bram and Faye in shock. Faye stood directly in front of the huge hole that Bram had made when he was blown away by the wind. Bram lay under the rubble of the wall. Layla is excited that Bram has destroyed the wall again. She finds it provocative. Faye asks why not do it if it will confirm his victory. Layla says that the guy's victory is obvious to everyone. Faye turns to Layla and asks if the mages will continue to participate in their student organization. Layla says that they will continue to participate in their student organization since Faye won. Suddenly, Bram stands up and says he hasn't lost yet. Layla turns to the boy and says he looks pathetic. Bram curses and then wonders why he always loses. Bram began to shout louder and ask several times why Faye was always ahead of him. Faye wanted to say something, but Bram interrupted him and continued to say that he could not lose to someone like him. He is convinced that Faye was lucky to be born with talent. Bram shouts that he wishes the guy had been gotten rid of on his birthday. Faye looks at the guy grimly. Suddenly, Alice's voice is heard saying that this is not true at all. Everyone turns to look at the girl. Alice says that Bram probably didn't know that Faye was training hard every day from morning until late at night. She starts crying and says that you can't call the guy's hard work just training. Faye lowers his head. Faye asks what they should do about the wall. Layla tells him that he doesn't have to worry because she'll ask for it to be repaired. The boy thanks the student council president. Suddenly, Faye comes up to Melia, takes her hands and says that they need to go. The girl was confused but still followed the guy. Jason tried to stop the guy, but Faye apologized to him and said that he was very tired. Faye was walking down the street with Melia. The girl asked the guy to stop. Faye turned around and asked what happened. The girl said nothing happened, she just pointed to her hand. Faye looked at the girl and asked what was wrong with her hand. The girl blushed and closed her eyes. Faye looked down and saw that he was still holding the girl's hand. He abruptly let go of the girl's hand and apologized. Melia was embarrassed. Faye began to apologize and said that he grabbed the girl's hand without realizing it. The girl said that it was nothing to worry about. Faye turns around and assumes that the girl is very tired. He asks if Melia is hungry, and then he says that she needs to take a bath. The guy says that he will draw a bath for the girl and takes off. A few minutes later, Melia was standing in the shower under the streams of water, and Faye sat on the bed for a while. Faye fell face down on the bed and started kicking it. He decided that the girl thought he was weird. He wondered what he was doing. Faye looked up and was seriously thinking about what he was doing. He remembered his recent duel with Bram. The boy realizes that he used magic, allowed anger and hatred to control him. He admits that he has not matured at all since then. Faye lies on his back and thinks that in the end he is no different from Bram. Faye remembers her sister Alice telling Bram that their brother had been training hard for years. Faye covers her eyes with her hand and realizes that this is not how it was supposed to be. Faye thought that Alice couldn't hate him because it was his parents who kicked him out of the family. Faye clutches her head in her hands, then turns to the side and notices a ball on the shelf of the bookcase. In the morning, Gason and Iris were training again. Gason fell to the floor and said that he was very tired. Iris approached the guy and said that now he had learned to enchant his body. She asked if the guy could further increase the purity of his magical power. Jason folds his arms and says he's all about quantity over quality. Iris says the guy can't compete with just that. She wonders what she's talking about. Faye and Melia approach the boys. Faye says hello and wishes everyone a good morning. Melia just smiles. Iris raises her voice and says that they arrived very late. She asked Faye and Melia not to leave her alone with Jason this morning. Jason starts to get indignant. Faye laughs. Jason notices that the guy was in a good mood. He turns around and says that they need to continue training. Faye approaches the guy and calls out to him. Jason asks what happened. Faye asks if Jason wants to ask him anything about the duel. Jason asks why he would want to ask about the duel. He asks if the guy wants him to ask about it. Faye says no. Jason turns to the guy completely and asks if it wouldn't be better if they just leave things as they are. Faye asks what this all means. Jason says he's really curious, but it all seems too complicated. Jason smiles and says that instead of forcing him to tell her something that isn't quite the truth, it's 10 times better to just leave things as they are. Melia turns to Faye and asks if it's time for them to go. Faye agrees with the girl and follows her. Iris approaches Jason and says that he sometimes says the right words. Jason asks what the girl is talking about. He claims that he is a good guy. Everyone started smiling because they thought Jason was funny. Jason, Faye, Melia, and Arius returned to the classroom. Jason sat at his desk and tried not to fall asleep so as not to earn extra lessons. He tried to focus all his magic power. The class teacher turned around and noticed that Jason had fallen asleep. He thought that it was time for him to start preparing methodological developments for additional lessons. The man turns to Faye. The boy asks what the teacher wanted. Aaron asked him to watch Jason's training in his free time. Faye asks why him. Aaron knows he has things to do, but he still asks him to help because Jason doesn't change at all in all his classes. The teacher thought that if Faye had a serious talk with the guy, he would listen to him. Aaron says that training is very important for mages. He asks if the boy can do it for Jason. Faye says that maybe he can do something. Aaron says that he is counting on the boy. Faye turns and looks at the boy with displeasure. Jessica walks into the office and asks if the guy can come over to her for a few minutes. The guy immediately turns to the principal. The director hands Faye a letter to the boy and says that she has a very important conversation with him. She asks the boy to follow her. Faye recognizes the seal on the letter. Bram stood in his father's office. The man asked his son to explain himself. Bram says that when he learned that Faye would also join the student organization, he couldn't leave it like that, so he challenged him to a duel and lost. Mother asks how Bram could lose to a mere mage. She asks if Faye was imitating someone stronger. Alice intervenes in the conversation and says that Faye fought fairly and did not deceive anyone. Everyone turns their gaze to the girl. Alice asks what she said. Her father says that her brother is no longer there. He convinces her that Faye is a stranger from school. He says that she should not call him her brother even by mistake. Alice looks at her father worried. Then the man looks back at Bram and asks why he lost. Bram says that's not how it happened. The guy looks away and says that he knew that he would be fighting a simple magician, so he couldn't show him his full strength. The girls look at their brother tensely. The father asks Bram to tell him the truth. The boy tries to convince him that he is not lying. Then the father asks what happened to Aaron's crystal. The boy tenses up and says that he used it for magical research. The father looks at the boy for a while, then turns his gaze to the girl and asks her to tell him the truth. Alice explains that Brahm used Aaron's crystal and spirit mania, but Faye was stronger and Brahm lost. Father asks Bram if everything really happened as Alice said. At that moment, someone knocks on the door of the office. Alex asks to come in. Armand comes in and apologizes. Alex asks what's wrong. Armand replies that the decree of His Majesty the King has arrived. Alex cries out in alarm. The man hands the letter to Alex. He opens the letter and reads that Alex Bonett, Addie Bonett, Cecilia Bonett, Armand Boswell, Alice Bonett. Bram Bonett must arrive at the royal castle of the Kingdom of Armando 10 days later at exactly noon. Alex clutches the letter tightly in his hand. He was angry that it happened right when they were having trouble with Faye. The man thinks that he should have dealt with the guy himself. At this time, Faye stood in front of the director and read a letter that he needed to arrive at the castle of the Kingdom of Armando in 10 days at exactly noon. The guy realized that one of the most decisive days of his fate had come. The director says that it is correct. She turns around and takes out a box with a suit for Faye. She says that she has prepared formal clothes for the guy. Faye looks at the girl in surprise. Faye raises his hands and tries to say something. Then the principal interrupts him and asks if this means the boy has a suit. Faye gives in and says that he does not have a suit. The principal says that Faye cannot go to the royal capital in a normal school uniform. She asks him not to worry and to accept the gift. Faye thanks the woman for the gift. He picks up the box and examines the suit. He wonders how many years have passed since he last wore a formal suit. The principal says that in 9 days a carriage will arrive at the main gate for him. Faye asks why not in 10 days. The principal smiles and says that it is half a day's ride from the school to the royal capital. Lana was hanging out the laundry. She turned away because she felt something strange. A leaf fell from a tree. The girl caught it and saw that it was rotten. She realized that the day had come when Faye went to the royal castle. Lana raises her hands and thinks about how to help her son solve the problem of visiting the kingdom. Later in the evening, Faye tried on the suit. Melia was delighted. She said the guy looked very handsome. Faye was very shy. Melia was sitting on the floor at the time and thinking about what she needed to complete her costume. The guy looks at the girl questioningly. Melia approaches Faye and puts a tie on him. While the girl was tying the tie on the guy's neck, she said that the guy simply cannot go without it. Faye was very embarrassed, so he asked the girl to wait a little. Melia looked up and screamed, then stepped back, apologizing. Faye says that nothing terrible happened. Faye remembers that he will be in the royal capital for a few days. He asks the girl if she can look after the room. Melia looks at the guy questioningly. Faye says that she can feel at home. The girl is very embarrassed by the guy's words, which scares him. Melia sits down on the floor and addresses Faye. She asks if he is sure he is okay. She says that if Faye goes to the royal capital, he will definitely meet the Bonett family. The boy understands everything. Faye smiles and approaches the girl. He sits down opposite her and asks her not to worry. The next morning, Melia and Faye left the building. The girl said that it was time for her to go to class. Faye told the girl that they would see each other again. Melia turned around and walked to class. She blushed and frowned as she remembered their conversation about the Bonett family. Then she turned around and looked at Faye as he walked away. The girl turns around and shouts to the fairy, wishing her luck. The boy turns around and smiles. Then Faye turns again and looks forward. He has decided that he needs to get serious. Melia remained standing near the entrance to the school, and Faye walked towards the carriage. Right next to the carriage stood a man with glasses and a short girl. They bowed and said that they were waiting for a guy. At the same time, they addressed him by his last name, Bonett. Faye thinks for a moment, then looks up and asks who the man and girl are. The man with glasses bows and says he is the royal butler. He gives his name as Trent Mendez. He is pleased to meet you. Faye turns her gaze to the short girl as she begins to speak in a very confused manner. The girl composes herself and says that she is a maid named Ana Mendez. Faye points out that the butler and the maid have the same last name. He asks if that means they are related. Trent confirms that he and Ana are brother and sister. Trent smiles and asks if they really don't look alike. He explains that they are not related by blood. Trent says that Ana is still little, so this can make a strong impression on her. He asks the guy to be more lenient with Ana. Ana asks the guy about this too. Everyone gets into the carriage and goes to the castle. Faye says that His Majesty invited him to the royal capital, although he might not be who he thinks. Trent tells the boy not to worry. He says that when they arrive at the castle, there will be a check to see if he is the one or not. Faye asks what kind of test. Trent says that there will indeed be a test, but he himself does not know how it will be carried out. He asks if the boy remembers anything like this when he visited the royal castle before. Faye asks if Trent is talking about the court mage wanting to study his magical power. Trent says that he is talking about that. He says that Aaron's crystal with Faye's magical power is still kept in the royal palace. Faye thinks about it. Faye knew that if another person tried to add their own magic power to the Aaron crystal that stored magic power, the two forces inside the crystal would repel each other. But if it was Faye, even if he used magic power on the Aaron crystal, it would not be reflected, because it was already stored in it. Anna began to fall asleep and fall on Trent's shoulder. The man tried to wake her up. He apologized to Faye. The guy says that it's nothing to worry about. He was also very tired from the trip. Faye remembered the girl who asked him to repeat the magic trick. The boy agreed, as it was the order of Princess Lettice. Lettice then pointed her finger at the boy and told him to stop using formal tones. She asked the boy to call her simply Lettice. Faye stretched out his hands and said that stopping using Her Highness was disrespectful and wrong. Then the girl says that in that case it would still be an order. She said that if the boy did not follow her order, then her father would arrest him for insulting him. Faye asks why he should be arrested for such a stupid thing. The boy becomes dejected but still stops using a formal tone. Lettice says that the boy still needs to practice, but this time she has forgiven him. Faye thanks the girl. Lettice asks the boy to repeat the magic spell as soon as possible. Faye agrees and creates water balls. The princess looks at the water balls in complete delight and claps her hands. Faye smiles too. Then Faye pops all the balloons. The girl laughs and says that Faye's magic is wonderful. She convinces him that it is amazing. The boy thanks the girl. Lettice then turns to the boy and takes his hands. She asks him to teach her magic. Faye looks away and says that she will soon be leaving the castle. Lettice asks when the boy will come again. Faye says he will have to report back after making a contract with the spirit. Lettice says that in that case they should meet in 10 days. The girl screams that it is a promise. The boy asks what it means. Lettice holds up her little finger and says that if Faye breaks her promise, he will have to fulfill one of her wishes. Faye asks why the girl so badly wants a boy to teach her magic. He says that the court magician teaches much better. Lettice says that she wants it to be him. Faye agrees and the girl screams with delight. A guy approaches Lettice and Faye. Lettice turns around and immediately shouts that she is happy to see her brother. Faye greets Prince Julian. Lettice runs up to her brother and tells him that Faye promised to teach her magic. Faye is stunned. Julian approaches Faye and apologizes for the trouble his sister has caused him. Faye says that is not true at all. Julian said he was looking for Faye because it was time for them to leave. Faye bowed and thanked the boy for the message. Julian thanked him too. Lettice hid behind her brother, then blushed and started screaming that Faye must definitely fulfill his promise. Faye smiles and promises that he will teach her magic. The carriage continued on its way. Trent suddenly says that he thinks they have arrived. Faye opens her eyes and sees beautiful views. They arrived at the royal capital, Armando. The guy blushes with admiration. Trent and Anna smile. Faye turns to Anna and Trent, commenting on how the city is still crowded. A huge crowd of people gathered around the carriage. They all saw the visitors of the Highness. They say that the carriage is still as beautiful as ever. Faye says she's very conspicuous to other people. Trent claims it's because they're in a royal carriage. The carriage enters the castle. Everyone gets out. Trent asks Faye to follow him. Faye was sitting on the sofa. Anna was carrying tea to the guy. Suddenly she tripped and the cup of tea that was on the tray began to fall. Trent manages to stop the falling cup of tea. He apologizes to the guy. Faye says that nothing bad happened. Anna thanks Trent for everything. Faye looks at the girl in confusion and wonders what this means. The door to the room where Faye was sitting opens. Faye is called out. The guy immediately turns his gaze to those who entered and sees Lettice and her brother Julian. Lettice starts crying and then she runs to the guy and hugs him. She says that she missed him so much. Faye doesn't have time to react. Faye looked at Julian, who covered his face with his hand and looked at him slyly. This made Faye even more embarrassed. Julian says that he understands that Faye and Lettice want to enjoy their meeting after so many years. He then says that they need to resolve the issue of Aaron's crystal. Faye agrees with him. Trent brings the crystal of Aaron and gives it to Faye. The guy reaches out to it and begins to use his magical powers. The crystal began to glow and spread magical energy. Julian was pleased that the crystal resonated. He says that they all witnessed that Faye is the very same member of the Bonett family. The girl is delighted that Faye could not lose to a demon. Then the fairy is led down the corridor of the castle. Trent says that the boy has had a hard day. He suggests that he rest. The man leads the boy to his room. Suddenly one of the rooms opens and the entire Bonett family comes out. Faye looks at her parents, sisters, and brother in horror. The Bonett family looks grimly at their former family member. At this point, Faye remembers how he was kicked out of the family. Faye looks at her father and says that they haven't seen each other for a long time. The man asks who the boy is. He says that he is too busy to remember every commoner. Faye asks if Alex heard anything about the commoner being his son. He wonders if the man remembers what he did to him. Alex asks how dare the boy disrespect him so. Faye looks at his entire family with a scowl. He realizes that his father now truly treats him like a commoner. Faye deep down hoped that his father at least regretted what he did to his son. The boy overestimated his father's humanity. He decides that now there will definitely be no mercy. Anna turns to Faye and asks if he is okay. The guy smiles and says that everything is fine. Trent and Anna bow to the boy and assume that the boy is very tired. They point to the room and ask Faye to rest. The boy thanks the maid and the butler. He enters the room and closes the door. Anna tells her brother that she hopes Faye is okay. Trent is also worried, as the boy has been through a lot at 13 years old. He hopes that nothing happens to him. Faye lay on his bed and couldn't sleep. He remembered that something like this had happened before. The boy remembers how 8 years ago he first stayed at the royal castle. That day he looked out the window. At some point the guy noticed Lettuce on the street. She was shaking all over. The guy went outside and approached her. Faye immediately threw a cloak over the girl's shoulders. Lettuce immediately recognized the boy. Faye was embarrassed and the girl frowned. Faye knelt down in front of the girl and introduced himself. He said that he was the son of Duke Bonett. Lettuce apologized. She asked why the boy was out on the street at such a late hour. Faye looked away as he was ashamed to admit that it was his first time sleeping in the royal castle, so he couldn't sleep. Faye tells about how he saw a girl in the window and decided to go to her right away. Lettuce laughed. Faye asks what the girl is doing outside. The girl says she just wanted to get away from strangers for a while. Lettuce talks about how the same thing happens every day. She is tired of being in the society of people. It seemed stupid to her. Lettuce looks up at the sky and says that when she looks at it, she forgets about all the unimportant things. Faye says that he understands the girl's feelings a little. Faye was the eldest son of a duke, so many aristocrats try to please him with flattery. Lettuce and Faye couldn't help but notice that all the praise addressed to them was actually just to take advantage of the situation. Lettuce looks at the boy in shock and asks him if he really felt the same way. Faye is at a loss as to how best to respond. He says that he probably doesn't think that way at all. Faye talks about how he always felt pressure from people when they called him a wunderkind. Lettuce asks if the boy has anything he would like to do. Faye asks what he wants to do. Lettuce says that's what she's interested in. She asks again. Faye thinks, then he looks at the girl with a smile and says that he would like to live up to his parents' expectations. Lettuce asks the boy again. Faye looks at the girl and does not understand why she reacted like that. Lettuce did not expect such an answer. The girl gets up from the ground and says that she would like to be with her beloved. She would like to walk with him. Faye asks if this is what the girl really wants. It seems to him both simple and complex. Lettuce leans over and closes her eyes. She begins to shiver and say that she is cold. Faye approaches the girl and uses fire magic. Lettuce says she feels warm. She asks if it's really fire magic. Faye asks if it is true that the girl is seeing magic for the first time. She says that she has seen magic before, but only from afar. Lettuce asks what Faye would like to do with her. The boy does not understand the girl's question. She means what he would like to become for her. The boy still does not quite understand the essence of the question. Faye blushes and says that he would like to have a friendly relationship with the princess. He hopes that she will support him in the future. Lettuce looks at the guy in surprise and then starts laughing and says that Faye is very funny. She claims that no one talks like that. The boy asks what it means. Lettuce agrees and suggests that they build a friendly relationship. And then the girl laughs. Faye remembered the way Lettuce had laughed when they met in the castle garden 8 years ago. The boy understood that the memories of 8 years ago no longer had anything to do with the present reality. Since then, the environment surrounding him has completely changed. Faye believes that he himself has not changed. Faye comes out of the room and sees Lettuce standing near the fountain. She looks worried. The guy goes outside. Lettuce turns and looks at Faye. The guy looks at the girl in surprise at first and then comes closer to her. Lettuce is happy that Faye came to her after all. Faye says that he feels bad because the girl predicted his actions. Lettuce folds her arms and is glad that they will be able to talk calmly. The guy is trying to say something that they don't really have much to talk about. Lettuce starts to get angry. She says that they have a lot of things to talk about since 6 years have passed. The guy says that even if the girl asks him about what happened to him during these 6 years, he won't be able to tell anything interesting since he lived in the forest all this time. Lettuce asks why he lived in the forest. Faye tells him that he was saved by a woman named Lana. He says that she was the one who took him in. Lettuce asks the guy to stop. The girl is amazed that Faye lived with a woman for 6 years. She asks if they lived in the forest alone. Faye confirms this information. Lettuce frowns and asks what the relationship was between him and Lana. Faye thinks about it, not understanding what the girl means. He says that Lana was his mother. Lettuce changes instantly. She is happy and says that the guy can forget her question. Faye does not understand anything but still agrees with the girl. Lettuce stops and says that she has a few things she wants to talk to him about. She also mentions the promise. Faye looks at the girl questioningly. Lettuce turns around and smiles at him. Lettuce turns to the guy. She wants to say something about his family. She tells him that his family was originally supposed to be his main ally in life. She says that it should be like that at any time. Lettuce claims that it should have been like that 6 years ago. She doesn't know the details of what happened in the Bonett family, but she still wants to support the guy. Faye says it's okay. He says that even if he doesn't have any blood relatives, he has someone he can call family. Lettuce tries to say something else. At this moment, Faye is thinking that she doesn't know how long she and Lana will be a family. Lettuce abruptly takes the guy's hands. Faye looks at the girl, dumbfounded. Lettuce says that no matter what happens, she will always be on the guy's side. She promises the guy that someday she will show him what a real family is. Lettuce looks up and her face is very close to Faye's. The guy asks what it means. The girl blushes and pushes the guy away, saying that it doesn't mean anything. Faye approaches the girl and hugs her. Lettuce is embarrassed and tries to stop the guy. The guy thanks her at this point. Alex slams his fist on the table and curses. He says he hates Faye. Faye's real mother is angry too. Alex was angry because Faye threatened their family's status. Faye wakes up as the sun begins to shine on his face. He turns around and says good morning to Melia. Then he realizes that he is not in the school building, but in the royal castle. Faye felt a strange feeling. The fact that Melia slept next to him was already something familiar. Suddenly, someone knocks on the door and asks if the guy is awake. The guy is scared at first. And then he comes to the door and sees Anna. He wishes the girl a good morning. Anna asks what the guy thinks about breakfast. The guy has already had a snack but still does not refuse the girl. Faye was sitting at a table with a huge amount of different food on it. Trent was standing next to him. The man asked what the guy was going to do after breakfast. Faye thought about it, so he hesitated with his answer. Anna was carrying a tray of food. At this point, Faye said that there were still a few hours left before the audience. Faye knew that he could even leave the castle for a few hours. Trent apologizes and asks that Faye spend all this time in the castle. Faye thought about it. Faye asks Trent if there is a place in the castle where magic is allowed. Trent says he will take the guy after breakfast. At this time, Anna runs up to them. Anna stumbles and drops the tray with a cup of tea again. Trent approaches the door and says that this is the entrance to training room number 2. He says that the boy will be able to use magic in peace there. Faye thanks the man. Trent bows and says that in that case, he will leave the guy so as not to disturb him. Faye goes inside and starts using magic. He decides to enchant his body first. Trent watched before leaving, saw Faye use magic. He was amazed. He thought that using non-systemic magic to enchant a body without singing was not so easy. Faye was wondering what would happen if Alex fought him. What time should he use what magic? Faye thinks that this won't be like their fight with Brahm. Suddenly, the boy remembers how he used the power of the 5 Imperial Beasts. Faye thought that all this was nonsense. He recalls that he couldn't control the power of the 5 Emperor Beasts, so he sealed them. He couldn't rely on their power when it was convenient for him. The boy curses. Suddenly, Lettuce enters the training room. She greets the guy. Faye asks what the girl is doing in this room. Lettuce says that she entered the room by accident. Faye asks how this could happen by accident. Lettuce smiles and asks if the guy really decided to practice magic. Faye replies that he just had a lot of free time. The girl looks at the guy carefully and asks if everything is okay. Lettuce then smiles and asks if the guy will show her the water ball trick. The guy remembers that simple trick and then asks if the girl can do it herself. The girl thinks that the guy doesn't remember about that trick. Faye says he remembers. He thought the girl could handle it herself since it was entry-level magic. The girl's mouth widens in surprise and then she frowns. Lettuce screams loudly, speaking negatively about the guy. Faye doesn't understand what's going on. The girl walks away from the guy because she is very angry. Faye tries to stop her, asking what he said. Faye did not understand why the girl was offended. He wondered if the girl really could not use magic. Faye thinks that the girl should have learned magic by now since they had a court magician in the kingdom. He wonders again what was wrong. Anna approaches Faye. The guy turns around and asks what happened. Anna says it's time to go to the audience. She said she'll straighten the guy's tie. Faye says he can handle it himself. Anna starts crying and asks if the guy is really afraid that she won't cope. Faye says that's not the problem. The guy finally agrees. He sits down on the floor so the girl can reach the tie. Anna comes up to the guy and tries to tie his tie, but she doesn't understand how to do it. She tried different options. After a few tries, Anna shouts out that she managed to tie the guy's tie. Faye thanks the girl. Then Anna suddenly jumps up and screams that she forgot about the perfume. Faye tried to stop the girl, but he didn't have time. Trent comes up to Faye and helps him with his tie. The man apologizes for Anna. Faye says that nothing bad happened. Anna runs up to Faye and says that she brought perfume. Trent closes his eyes and says that the girl brought vegetable oil. He asks how the girl could confuse perfume with vegetable oil. Trent calls the girl to follow him and says that they will go and look for the spirits together. Anna asks Faye to wait a little longer. Faye looks at the girl in confusion but still agrees to wait for her. He looks at how happy Anna is that Trent is helping her. The guy smiles, thinking that they are good brother and sister. Once upon a time, 5 heroes achieved great achievements in the war against demons. The 5 great ones, having received the status of dukes, became one of the 7 most influential families of Armando. But besides them, there were also those who had no special military merits for the kingdom. 2 houses that provided the 5 heroes with enormous logistical assistance in exchange for being awarded the title of duke. And of these 2 families, one was not quite ordinary. The Dirkserk family is a unique house among the aristocracy, having another title in addition to the status of one of the 7 great. The king thanked the heroes for saving the country. He gave each of them the status of a duke. He said that they could ask him for anything they wanted. After the war with the demons ended, they all wanted to get a huge piece of land. The whole family asked for land and thanked the king. The man turned to Dirkserk and asked what the girl wanted. He wondered if the girl wanted land like everyone else. The girl replied that she did not need land. The king asked what the girl would like to receive in that case. The girl replied that all she wanted was to live quietly and peacefully with her little daughter, who had lost her father. The girl asked for a small plot of forest and a small house. She claimed that she didn't need anything else besides that. The king found this interesting, as the girl did not ask for money, status, or honor. He wanted to talk to her later. From then on, once a year, the girl came to the castle to have an audience with the king. Only the king and the most powerful people in the country know the Dirkserks by sight, and also some of the 7 officials who took part in the war. 10 years ago, the same girl from the family died. Near her coffin sat a girl and cried. After her mother's death, the girl took over the management of the house. The girl lived in her little house in the forest all alone, until one day she met a little boy there. Faye was sitting on the couch very tense. Trent walked into the room. He tells him that the king has summoned him. Faye looks at the man in surprise. Trent smiles and asks if Faye's heart is ready. Faye is confused and does not know what to answer him. Faye approaches the door and Trent informs the knights at the entrance that Faye Bonett has arrived. The knights allow entry. Faye opens the doors and enters. He sees the king sitting on the throne, and also his entire family, who immediately turned around and looked at him with a dark look. The king is happy about the arrival of the fairy and says that everyone is finally here. The entire Bonett family stares at the boy. Alex keeps his eyes on his son. Faye also stares back at them all. The boy comes in and says that Faye Bonett has arrived by order of His Majesty King Alfred Armando. Faye walks further down the hall and kneels. The entire Bonett family looked at him with displeasure. The king says that they haven't seen each other for a long time. The man asks if that's true. Faye says that it's been 6 years. The king is amazed at how many years have passed and says that the boy has grown a lot. The fairy looks up at the king and says that he hasn't changed at all in all this time. The king says that flattery is good, but he was too old for that. The king says he couldn't even notice his vassals lie. The king says that since everyone is here, he would like to see confirmation that Faye is a true member of the Bonett family. The man then says that he needs to decide what punishment the Bonett family will bear. He also adds that he needs to decide how to treat Faye in the future. The king decides to start with the last point. He says that the boy from now on officially becomes Fairy Dirk. The boy thanks the king. Alex stands up and starts to object. He says that Faye is a member of the Bonett family. He believes that their family should decide how to address Faye. The king thinks. He asks if Alex's family will engage in secret murder and false statement again. Alex tries to justify himself. The king says that up until now, no matter what the aristocrats did, the country's turned a blind eye. But he thinks this case goes beyond any limits. He says Alex did a terrible thing by filing a false report. The king asks Alex whether his actions can really be considered treason. Alex is initially stunned, but after a few seconds, he starts talking about how their duke's family must be strong. The man believes that this is why in this case he needed to get rid of the one who was dragging the whole family down with his weakness. He says that this is their family's policy. The king asks if such a policy really reigns in the Bonett family. The man says that even if he admits and accepts everything Alex said, he can do nothing about the one who dared to make a false statement. Alex tries to justify himself, but the king interrupts him and asks why the man called Faye weak. He wonders how a weak could defeat Bram in a duel. Alex tries to justify himself again, but fails. The king turns to Alex and says that the position of duke is bestowed upon him by power. He asks if it would be better if Faye inherited the Duke's status rather than Bram. Alex gets angry and says that Bram lost because of his carelessness. He claims that he was defeated not because of his outstanding abilities. The man is sure that in the future his son Bram will become a spiritualist comparable in strength to himself. Alex argues that handing over the status of Duke to a man weaker than him is tantamount to humiliating this title. The king says he was simply suggesting this scenario. The king reminds him that the man said that the future duke should not be inferior in strength to him. He asks if this means that the future duke should be stronger than the current Alex. Alex agrees. Suddenly Alex shouts out that the fairy will never defeat the spirit mage. The king looks at the man in surprise. He asks why they don't have a duel then. The door opens and a girl enters the hall. Faye turns around and is surprised by the guest who has arrived. The king chuckles and asks if the day is not strange. He says that the girl came despite it not being the beginning of the year. He addresses the girl as Lady Lanala. The girl notices Faye and waves to him. The boy couldn't understand what his adoptive mother was doing in the castle at such a moment. Lana approaches Faye and hugs him. She says that the guy charges her with positive emotions. Faye gets embarrassed and asks the girl to stop. He says that the king is nearby. The girl laughs and calls the guy shy. The king and prince turn around and look at Lettuce, who is very angry at Lana's attitude towards Faye. Lana smiles and Faye becomes even more embarrassed. At this point, the king clears his throat and asks if they should calm down a bit. The man asks why Lana came to the castle. Lana blushes and says that she wanted to see her son. The king asks which son the girl wanted to see. He does not remember the girl having a son. Lana hugs Faye again and says that he is her son. The guy blushes again. The king is amazed that healing magic was able to heal Faye's mortal wounds. He guesses how Faye became the girl's half-son. Alex interrupts the conversation and asks who the girl is. The king recalls that Alex has never met Lana before. The king introduces the girl to the man. He tells him that she is the current head of the Dirksirk family. Alex immediately becomes tense because the girl is a representative of the Great Seven families. Faye looks at the girl in shock. Alex suggests that the Dirksirk family used healing magic. The king turns to Lana again and asks what she meant by duel. The girl says that the king should look at Faye's current abilities. The king listens attentively to the girl. Lana approaches Faye and asks if it will be better this way. Faye does not have time to answer anything as she falls into a stupor. Alex smiles and says he doesn't mind. He's ready to prove his abilities once again, inevitably. Faye looks at her father angrily, wondering what inevitability he's talking about. The king ponders. Faye looks at the man, then looks away as she remembers the duel with Bram. The guy remembered that Alex's magic, stored in the crystal of Aaron which Bram used in the duel, was most likely weaker than the real one. The guy also remembered that there is spirit magic. He thought that sooner or later this magic would stand in his way. That is why the guy resolutely agreed to the duel. The king closes his eyes and remains silent, and then says that in that case the duel will still take place, but only in 15 days. He says that Faye and Alex should prepare well before the duel. Faye and Alex glare at each other. Faye returned late in the evening. He stood under the streams of water in the shower. The boy remembered his father's eyes, which looked at him with hatred. Faye punched the wall. He sank down, thinking that Alex had not weakened at all. He was convinced that Alex's magical power was contempt. Faye knew the man was merciless. He wondered if he could defeat him. Then Faye finally gets his bearings and is already resolutely thinking that he will be able to defeat his father. He will not spare his father. The next morning, Faye met his classmates. They were all worried, so they said that it was all a nightmare. Faye looked dejected. Jason put his hands on his head and said that something terrible was always happening. Iris screamed that they would have to stay after school and practice. Faye asked what his classmates were talking about. He asked them to explain everything. Jason began to explain. Aaron had come into the classroom the day before. He apologized for being late. All the students noticed that the man looked depressed. They decided to ask him what had happened. The man says that the school decided to hold a competition between their class and Class A. Before the class began, the man was sitting in the office. Nerold came in and noticed that Aaron was full of enthusiasm. Nerold approached Aaron and said that no matter how hard he tried, his students would always be weaker than him. He was sure that his students were many times stronger than ordinary magicians. Aaron smiles and says he can't pretend he hasn't heard him say that. He reminds the man that Bram from Nerold's class lost to his student Faye. Nerold starts to get angry. In that case, he decided to suggest to Aaron that their classes participate in the competition. Aaron asked what that meant. Nerold suggests a battle of teams. He convinces Aaron that this way they will be able to determine whose class is stronger. Nerold asked why the man refused. He suggested that Aaron was afraid. He said that the man could simply fall to his knees and then Nerold would forgive him. Aaron began to be indignant. Jason says it will be a team battle. He adds that the first fighter will be Faye. Then Iris starts to tell what the homeroom teacher pointed out to her and Jason, saying that she and Faye are on good terms so they should help each other. The homeroom teacher convinced them that teamwork is very important in this matter. He does not accept objections. Iris and Jason fall to their knees and say that's exactly how it happened. Faye thinks that this is all very boring. Iris said she had a guess about the participants from Class A. It was easy to guess who would participate. Bram asks what all this means. He was making fun of the fact that Class A would be fighting Class E. He asked not to be made fun of. Jason says he heard that Class A will be represented by Bram Bonett, Alice Bonett, and Struff Carnal. Iris spreads her arms wide and says that Nerold has caused Aaron problems. She mentions that Faye has only recently returned from the royal castle. She thinks the guy is tired. Faye thinks about it, then says he's not particularly tired. He says it'll be a good workout for him. Jason raises an eyebrow and asks what the guy is talking about. Iris wonders what happened in the castle. Melia was thinking about how adorable Faye was. Jason turns to Iris and asks who Struff Carnal is. Iris didn't know either. Faye says they need to give it their all anyway. After school, all the classmates gather in the training room again. Faye says that first, Iris and Jason must learn to work together. The boy and girl ask what that means. Faye says that the opponent is a spiritualist. Therefore, without cooperation, it is impossible to win. Iris glares at Jason and asks if she really has to cooperate with the guy. Jason says that the girl doesn't have to look at him like he's trash. Faye reaches down and ties the legs of Jason and Iris. The boy and girl tried to stop him, but the boy had already tied the last knot. Faye asks what they think about racing on 3 legs. He thinks it should be perfect for Iris and Jason to learn to cooperate. Iris and Jason try to take a step forward and immediately fall. The girl screams at the guy to move away from her. The guy screams back that the girl is holding him back. They tried to get up from the floor. When Iris and Jason finally got up from the floor, the girl turned to the guy and asked if the guy could move his legs. Jason asked the girl the same question. Iris and Jason were very angry with each other. Faye looked at them from the side and apologized. He felt like he was wrong. The guy wanted to suggest another way, but he noticed something strange while the girl and the guy were arguing. An idea came to his mind. A magic ball flew right between Iris and Jason. They both turned around and noticed Faye with his hand outstretched. Iris pointed at Faye and yelled that it was very dangerous. Jason asked what the boy was doing. Faye said he had done nothing. He wondered if his classmates could handle the unexpected. He said they had no problem with that. Iris reiterates that it was very dangerous. Jason points out that if Faye had hit them, he could have hurt them badly. Melia looked at her classmates and wondered why Faye was treating them like that. Faye raises her index finger up. Iris and Jason realize that the guy wants them to look up. When Iris and Jason look up, they notice a huge amount of fireballs. They immediately put their hands up and create a wall of water. Faye looks at Iris and Jason with surprise at first. Then the surprise turns to a smile and laughter. He says that they both complement each other perfectly. At this time, Bram and Alice were leaving the school. Bram turned to Alice and told her not to do anything stupid. The girl asked what it meant. Bram replied that he would fight with Faye. He asked if Alice would be able to fight in tandem with Struff. Elise wonders if her brothers will fight again. Bram says that the girl never answered him. Alice looks up and says she understands. Bram clicks, and the girl lowers her head again. Bram turns around again and demands that the girl speed up. He says that lately she has stopped listening to him. Alice raises her hands and clenches them into fists, insisting that this is not true. Bram asks what the girl has a problem with emotions. Alice asks what her brother means. Bram wonders if he too has some kind of emotional issues. He thinks that it's definitely not because of Faye. Bram tries to understand what is the reason for his anxiety. He suggests that it is Alice either hatred or envy. Then the guy finally stops at envy, but he cannot understand why he is envious. Alice follows her brother. She tried to figure out what to do. Her legs couldn't move. The girl stops and looks up. She feels something. Bram turns around and asks why the girl stopped. He demands that she speed up. Alice bends down and apologizes. Bram doesn't understand what's happening to his sister. Alice runs away and yells at Bram that she has unfinished business. She asked her brother to come back first. Bram scolded. Jason and Iris were confused. They asked Faye if he was telling the truth. Faye confirmed his own words and asked his friends to be careful. He claimed that Alice's abilities were many times stronger than Bram's. At that moment, Alice runs up to them and immediately attracts their attention. Faye looks at her sister in confusion. Alice tries to say something. Jason and Iris walk away. Faye hears Jason say that they still have things to do so they will go. Faye asks what that means. Iris apologizes and says that she will go too. Faye looks at Alice. And then he turns around and says he has to go too. Alice stops the guy and asks him to wait. She asks if they can talk for a while. Faye refuses. He thinks that it is impossible. Then, out of doubt, he finally agrees and says that they can talk for a short time. Alice smiles. Faye wonders why the girl decided to talk to him. Alice asks if Faye will participate in the competition. Faye says that she will indeed participate in the competition. He asks the girl the same question. Alice says that she is participating too. She wonders why she was chosen. Faye wonders if Alice is just very shy and modest. But he knew that the girl's abilities were much higher than Bram's. Alice noticed that the guy addressed her as a classmate, not a sister. She was sad about it, but she was glad that he agreed to talk to her. Faye asks the girl not to worry. He assures her that he is not going to show his emotions at the competition. Alice turns to Faye and asks if he really intends to win. The guy replies that this is exactly his wish. Alice says she understands. She asks if the boy will really fight her then. Faye hesitantly replies that they will have to fight. Alice lowers her head and looks down gloomily. Then she stands up and says that she will definitely win. Faye looks at the girl in amazement. He didn't expect such a reaction from her. Alice bows and runs away, and the guy blushes and looks after her. The next day, Iris, Gayson, and Faye decided to meet at the establishment. Faye looked at the menu and asked what kind of strategy meeting his classmates wanted to hold. Jason drinks from his glass and clarifies once again that the students from Class A are spiritualists. He asks if this is true. Jason feels that they will never be able to defeat them by force. He also does not want to cooperate with Iris. He says that their chances of winning are slim. Iris becomes indignant. Iris smiles and says that she didn't expect Gayson to be so calm and reasonable. She thought he had no brains anymore. Now Gayson is starting to get angry. While Iris and Gayson were arguing, Faye asked them to order something. He turned to the waiter who came to their table. When the waiter brought everything the students ordered, Jason asked Iris and Faye to listen to his plan. Faye was amazed that the guy had a plan. Iris asked what the guy had a plan. Jason says the rival spirits are in the form of animals. He says they can do some interesting things. Iris asks again about the animals. Gayson asks if his classmates understand. Iris and Faye think about it. Gayson looks at his classmates, waiting for their answer. Faye raises her hand and apologizes for giving up. Iris says she's giving up too. Iris thinks the guy has figured out a way to exploit the animal's lack of intelligence, but she can't figure out how. Jason smiles and then pretends to say that he will still tell what he uses in battle. He says it's bait. Faye spits out her drink. Iris's eyes widen. Iris asks what bait means. Jason says that they will need to distract the spirits, and while they enjoy the food, they will fight the mages directly. Jason is sure that the spirits are full-fledged animals, so they are not particularly smart. He is sure that they will definitely succeed. Faye closes her eyes and thinks that there is no hope for them. Iris says that the only one who is not very smart is Jason. Jason asks what this all means. He starts to get upset. Faye tells the guy that spirits don't care about food. Gayson says that they are animals. Faye explains that most spirits get their magical power from the food they receive from the mage. That's why they aren't interested in their food. He says that Jason won't be able to distract the spirit by putting food in front of it. Iris says that Jason constantly sleeps in class, so he doesn't know basic things. Iris says it would be more effective to use Jason himself as bait than to place a plate of food in front of the spirit. Jason asks why he must act as bait. Faye ponders the girl's words about using Gayson as bait. He thinks it's a great idea. Iris and Gayson ask what this means. Gayson is outraged again and asks why he has to be bait. Faye asks the guy to calm down and listen to him. Faye says that he has been observing Iris and Jason for a long time. He says that Iris has incredibly pure magical power. Faye claims that the difference in their physical abilities is small, but it is in their magical power that they have significant differences. He is convinced that he can use this. Iris smiles and looks at Gayson. The guy at this moment clenches his hand into a fist and looks back at the girl angrily. Faye says that Jason's strong point is his impressive power. The guy asks what Faye means by that. Faye says that Jason is best off attacking the enemy from the front. Iris will have to go behind, as she is agile and agile. Jason turns to Faye and asks if he's kidding. Faye is sure that this is the best option for them. He asks if Iris and Jason want to train. Jason asks how they will train. Faye says that Jason will have to attack from the front. At this time, Faye will take all the spells. Jason asks if the guy is trying to provoke him on purpose. Iris thinks about it and says that in that case, they will only be able to attack one enemy. Jason starts thinking about it and asks if Faye will really fight two opponents at once in that case. The guy answers that she will. Faye assumes that he will only have to deal with one person. Iris turns and asks what that means. Faye assumes that his opponent will be Bram since he is too proud. Faye doesn't think Bram will want to share with Elise. He assumes Bram will order Elise to stay behind or send her to help Stroof Carnal. Iris remembers what Faye said the day before about Alice being stronger than Bram. Faye only says that Stroof Carnal is definitely weaker than the Bonets. Faye is convinced that Alice is not only stronger, but also unpredictable, which is why she is the one they should fear the most. The guy says that in this battle, Jason will play a very important role as bait. Jason asks why he has to play the role of bait. Suddenly someone appears near the guys and asks what they are doing. It was the guy who was wondering if the guys were really discussing strategy. He says that it is hard to be an ordinary mage. Jason turns to the guy and asks who he called a regular mage. The guy repeats that he was talking about them. Iris asks who the guy is. The guy starts to get upset because the girl didn't know who he really was. The guy looks at Iris and sees her frowning. The guy blushes as he begins to feel his heart begin to beat faster. Faye asks if the boy is really Stroof Carnal. The boy looks at Faye and says that he is. He looks at the boy and asks if he is really Faye Dirk. Stroof says he's heard about Faye. He's convinced it's pretty stupid for someone with that kind of power to remain among ordinary mages. He says Faye won't show up as long as Iris and Jason are holding him back. Jason and Iris start to get upset. Jason asks if the guy is really trying to provoke them into a fight, and Iris asks what the guy is saying. Stroof closes his eyes and asks the boys to calm down. He says they don't need to be angry just because he told the truth. He asks if Iris and Jason understand that. Jason and Iris think that if they had a little more strength, even Faye wouldn't be able to hold them back. Stroof asks the boys not to be upset. He says that they will inevitably lose to him anyway. Stroof approaches Iris and asks her what she's thinking, calling her kitten. He wonders why they don't just do as he says to avoid any unnecessary trouble. Stroof puts his hand on Iris' shoulder and the girl starts to complain. At that moment, Jason points at the girl and asks if Stroof really called her kitten. He thinks the girl looks more like a gorilla. Stroof asks how the boy can disrespect a girl like that. He says he'll make sure the boy doesn't say things like that again. Jason asks the boy not to make him laugh. He says the boy doesn't even know what Iris is made of. Iris asks what all this means. Stroof leaves and wishes the boys good luck one last time, then he says it's useless anyway. Faye suddenly stops Stroof. The guy turns around. Faye says the guy is wrong. He tries to convince him that the guy will lose to Iris and Jason. Stroof asks what that means. He asks the guy if he knows what he's saying. Faye convinces him that it's true. Jason and Iris glare at Stroof. The guy turns around and says he'll be looking forward to it. He says he'll see you again and leaves. Jason curses and says that Stroof really pisses him off. Iris says that he didn't seem as bad to her as she heard. Jason is indignant and says that it is not the girl who is going to be the bait. Faye smiles and confidently says that everything is fine. He convinces his classmates that they will definitely win. He asks them to believe in it. Iris and Jason look at the guy, not knowing what to say. At that moment, Melia enters the establishment. She greets the guys and apologizes for the wait. Jason turns to the girl and asks if she is really done with her business. The girl replies that she is done with all her business. Faye says they have 9 days left, so they need to practice hard to avoid regrets. Stroof lies on a park bench and remembers Iris. He blushed as he remembered how she looked at him. The guys started swearing and shouting that it was all because of her. 9 days after classes, all the students gathered at the arena where the fight between Class A and Class E was to take place. All the students are gathered together again. One of them tells about hearing that there was an argument between the teachers. One of the students wonders if it is not obvious that Class E has no chance of winning. One of the students asks if her classmates have heard that Faye is in Class E. Nerold announces that all the students and teachers have gathered. He says into the microphone that Class A will be fighting against Class E. He suggests that everyone enjoy the battle and place bets on the winners. Aaron approaches his students and says that Nerold is very smug. The students immediately greet their homeroom teacher. Aaron turns to his students and says that he believes in them. He believes that they will definitely win. Iris, Faye, and Jason were surprised by the teacher's reaction. Faye smiles and says that it all started when Aaron got mad because everyone was laughing at his class. He says that they will definitely win. The students in the stands draw Aaron's attention. One of the boys points out that the teacher is completely sweating from nervousness. They all look at the teacher in confusion, assuming that he has already given up. Aaron continues to yell and asks his students to try hard. He believes in them. Jason yells back that they will do everything they can to win. Nerold is about to explain the rules. He says they can't use Aaron's crystal. Nerold says that if the students get injured during the battle, it will be their responsibility. The man adds that if they can incapacitate their opponents, they will win. Faye says he'll fight Bram and Alice. He says Jason and Iris will have to deal with Stroof. Jason says the guy can rely on them. Nerold then becomes more serious. and after the countdown loudly announces that the battle can begin. Faye enchants the body and takes off. Struff is amazed at the guy's speed. Faye creates a clay shield right behind him. Struff stops abruptly because of the obstacle. Bram smiles and says that his brother has come after all. He claims that there is no way back. Faye tells Bram that he will be his opponent, just as the boy wanted. Struff turns his head, realizing that his opponents will be Iris and Jason. Jason and Iris attack the boy. Struff says that they are too weak. He is convinced that no matter how many of them there are, nothing will change. Jason says the guy may not be expecting it to be easy. Iris says it's time to teach the guy a lesson. Struff began to make a contract with the noble spirit. Iris shouted that she would not allow the guy to do this. The girl launched several fireballs at him. Struff asked his spirit to absorb his power. He smiled. Suddenly, someone created water balls to protect Struff. Iris and Jason turned around to see Alice using her magic to help Struff. Faye was surprised that a girl would help Struff. Struff continued to connect with his spirit. When he was done, he raised his hand and decided to summon lightning with the lightning rod spell. Faye launched a fireball at his sister. Alice turned around and stopped the fireball with her water ball. Faye watched his sister closely. He saw that she was indeed very strong. Alice was able to reflect 6 of Faye's fireballs with 12 water balls. She has the ability to instantly determine if her magic is inferior to that of her opponent, and then reflect it back with one twice as strong. Faye knew that if she felt that someone with a different point of view was dangerous, she would agree with him to protect herself. Bram yells at Alice and demands that she get out of the way. He tells her that she needs to go to Struff. The girl is stunned. Faye launches a magical charge towards the girl. Alice stops and turns her gaze to the boy. Faye had to deal with Bram and stop Alice. He couldn't let her go down this path. Jason asks Iris if she's ready. He says she can't let him down. Iris says it's all about the guy. Struff asks what's wrong. He wonders if Iris and Jason are going to attack him. The guy blushes because he thinks Iris looks cute when she's angry. Iris screams at the boy not to even hope. At that moment, Struff gives his spirit the command to use the Thunder Needle. Jason runs into the attack and shouts that he will show the guy who is really weak. A huge amount of electric charges fly straight at him. Jason smirks. Faye asked if Iris and Jason knew where the spiritualist's weak spot was. Jason asks if it wasn't their lack of weaknesses that allowed them to dominate normal mages. Faye says the guy is right. He mentions what many say about spiritualists having no obvious weaknesses. Faye then refutes these rumors. He says that the weakness of spiritualists is that their spirit uses magic. Jason spreads his arms wide and asks if this is the advantage of spiritualists. He claims that the magic of spirits is stronger than that of ordinary magicians. Jason believes that this is why they are at a disadvantage, not being able to use it. Faye says that it's because spirit magic is too strong. He says that there's one gap that spirit mages can't fill. Faye says that using spirit magic, they can't cast any other spell, on the condition that they don't use any special tools. Faye explains that while a spirit mage uses spirit magic, he himself is vulnerable. The more confident the mage is, the more he loses his guard. Jason uses fire magic and a wall of fire appears right in front of him. The spell Fire Wall is an intermediate magic. It was too early for Jason to use it. He did not know how to use it yet. Struff didn't think Jason could defend himself with a wall of fire. Jason knew that without Struff. He wasn't going to stop the guy, he just needed time, even if it was for a second. Jason was going to buy himself as much time as he could. All he had to do was direct the spirit's magic towards himself. At this point, Iris jumped out from behind Jason. She launched several fireballs at Struff. Bram launched a fire arrow at his brother Faye. Faye blocked all of Bram's magical attacks. Faye thought that if Bram just kept casting spells on him, he would definitely have enough time. Faye thought that it was an easy victory. Suddenly, a water spear flew at the guy. The guy turned around and covered himself with a clay shield. Bram yelled at Alice not to interfere in their fight anymore. The girl apologized to her brother. Faye looked at the girl who didn't know what to do. He thought that the girl had made a big mistake when she decided to interfere in Bram's affairs. Faye looked at Iris and Jason. He realized that everything was going according to plan. In that case, he couldn't afford to lose. Faye used the spell Elemental Control. Bram started to scold because the guy used deception magic again. Bram launched a fiery spear at Faye. Faye understood that Bram had encountered deception magic before, so it would not fright him now. Faye also responded by launching several fire spears, which greatly surprised Bram. Thus, Bram dropped out of the battle. Faye thought that now he had to deal with Alice and buy some time. Suddenly, Alice's voice was heard, opening the water shell and protecting Bram from the fire spears. Faye looked at the girl in bewilderment. He didn't think that she would try to fight. Bram turns to Alice. The girl interrupts him and apologizes. Bram does not understand what is happening. Alice at this moment looks at Faye and says that she wants to fight him. Faye remembers that in her childhood, Faye was always with Alice. He showed her various magic tricks. The girl was delighted and wanted to become like her brother. But the contract with the spirit was not made, so Faye had to flee the house. That day, Alice stood by the window and wondered how something like this could have happened. The girl remembers Alex calling them all into his office and telling them it was over. He demanded that they stop calling Faye their brother. He asked the girl not to make him repeat it over and over again. Alice was very saddened by this outcome of events. She thought that if she could have stopped her parents that day, then maybe Faye was still part of their family. But she understood that she did not have such power. Because of this, the girl was very worried. She wanted to become stronger so that she would not feel helpless anymore. From that day on, Alice began to study even harder. Thanks to this, she was able to meet her brother again. She was very happy. Alice had never disobeyed Bram's orders before that day, but at least once she decided to show her character. Alice wanted to test her strength after so many years of hard training. She wanted Faye to see her strength. Bram turned to the girl and asked her not to make him laugh. Faye threw a stone at Bram and asked him to be quiet. Bram fell to the ground unconscious. Faye turns to the girl and says that this is a very unexpected turn for him. He did not think that Alice would also want to fight for real. Faye stared at the girl. He assumed that the girl's spirit was of an intermediate level. It was difficult for him to determine. Faye also notes that the girl's defense was impressive. There was nothing superfluous in her magical power. Alice knew she was being rude and that she really should have apologized. But she wanted to fight Faye. Faye didn't understand why the girl was acting like that. Then he tried to stop his thoughts and reminded himself that the girl hated him. He thought the girl looked happy when Faye was thrown out of the house. Faye frowned and Alice looked at him with a smile. At that moment, the guy thought that he had something to fight for. He was already prepared, so all he had to do was fight. Iris launched several fireballs at Struve, causing a massive explosion that was visible from all over the stands. Nerold reports that Class E is advancing on Class A. He says that Class A did a great job. Iris looks at the place where the boy was and wonders if she succeeded. The smoke clears and Struve appears, saying that he was in pain. Iris looks at the boy and wonders why there was no effect. The boy began to move towards the girl and ask her if she really thought that this attack would cause him any harm. Struve turns his head to Jason and says that he is not capable of fighting at all. He calls him weak. He convinces the girl that Jason could not land even one blow. Iris gets angry and says that is not true. Struve recalls the moment when Jason was rushing towards him and trying to attack. Then he looked at the girl and noticed that she had started to cry and ask Faye for help. Struve asks what's wrong with the girl's face. He asks her to stop. Then he smiles and says he's very excited. Struve comes closer to Iris and asks if she will go on a date with him. The girl scolds herself at this moment. She thought about how Struve fought the two of them alone, despite the fact that she was quite strong. The girl began to cast a spell. She asked Jason to provide her with an opponent. Jason gets up from the floor and walks over to Struve. He tells the guy not to even think he's won. Iris looks at the guy, dumbfounded. Jason says that the girl doesn't seem like herself as she is shaking and afraid. He asks where the strong and proud girl has disappeared to. Iris asks what all this means. Struve looks at the guy in bewilderment. He says the guy is trying harder than he expected. Jason points at the boy and says that they, ordinary mages, are trained differently than people like Struve. Struve smirks and apologizes haughtily. Then Struve calls upon his spirit again and says that he feels the boy is underestimating the spiritualist. Jason looks at the boy in confusion. Iris yells at Jason to use magic faster. Jason says that he knows what he needs to do. Faye says that even if Struve lets down his guard, they must not forget that he has a spirit. Therefore, Struve will not be so easy to defeat. Faye wants his classmates to do something even if Struve manages to put up a defense. He says it's exactly what they've been training so hard for the last 9 days. Struve uses lightning and tells Jason to be more calm or he will regret it. Iris and Jason create a wall of fire that combines the energy of two people who use the same magic in the same place at the same time. They become stronger. Iris and Jason's magic manages to suppress Struve's magic. The boy doesn't understand what's happening. He doesn't understand if this is really all his power. He was amazed that ordinary mages were able to repel his attack. Faye said that spirit mages rely too much on their magic. Even if it is reflected, most of them will continue to use spirit magic simply because they have no other choice. Iris and Jason continued using magic. Iris says that Faye was right because Struve really isn't trying to do anything. Jason says that he's bored. Struve realizes that his magic was repelled. He wonders how Iris and Jason did it. When Struve was chosen to represent their class in the battle with Class E, then he thought that he would win anyway. He was going to use a simple spell. He thought so from the very beginning. Now he stood in the arena and did not understand how this could happen. He was amazed by the result of the two mages combining their magic. Iris notices that Stroof's magic is getting weaker. At this moment, the girl remembers Fairy, who said that spirit magic takes much more energy than ordinary magic. Before the fight, Faye convinced his classmates that if they could just stand firm, they would defeat Stroof. Iris yells that they will stand firm until the end. Jason yells that they will do as Faye said. At this point, Struff looks at the guys tensely and understands that his chances of winning are decreasing. He curses because he has no idea what he can do. Stroof's spirit begins to fade. Jason asks if Stroof's spirit is really leaving. Iris says the spirit has used up all its energy. Stroof curses. Jason runs up to Stroof, swinging his fist, and asks if he's tired of fighting them with magic. Jason smirks and asks if the guy really thinks Jason can beat him in a straight fight. Struff says that Jason is very arrogant. Jason then punches Struff in the face. Jason continues to punch Struff. The guy is unable to dodge or block the blows. Jason continues until Struff passes out. Jason picks him up and reminds him that they train differently. He then falls to the ground from exhaustion. Iris smiles and laughs at the fact that the mages ended up in a normal fight. She asks the guy how he could come up with something like that. Jason smirks. Iris also falls next to Jason. The guy smiles and says that all this had to be done since Faye asked them to. Alice presses her hand to her chest and says that she wants to fight Faye. She stands right in front of her brother. Faye stares at the girl. At this moment, Alice remembers how the boy showed her various magic tricks as a child. Faye at that moment also remembered his sister and thought that she hated him. The guy continues to stare at the girl, and the girl smiles at Faye. Then Faye takes off and is about to attack his sister. He wasn't going to spare Alice. Faye enchanted his body. Alice used water magic again. The girl created a wall of water in front of her, so the guy hit it with his hand. Then Faye pulled his hand back and used thunder magic. He launched a thunder ball. Alice folded her arms and started cursing. The girl started throwing water balls at the guy again. Faye threw several spears of flame at the girl. Then the boy began to dodge the girl's attacks. At that moment, he thought about the girl throwing various spells at him with quick and smooth movements. Alice was tired and landed on the floor. Faye was standing right in front of her. The girl smiled because Faye was really strong. Alice stood up and called for a rain of water. She shouted that she would not lose. Faye looked at the drops and compared their power to the power of bullets. Faye extended his hand forward and threw a stone ball in response. Alice was amazed that the stone ball instantly split into pieces, beating off the water droplets with incredible accuracy. Alice knew that breaking a stone ball was a very difficult task for a normal person. So she was amazed that Faye managed to land a perfectly accurate blow, offsetting Alice's attack. She still thought the guy was amazing. Faye thought that the fastest way to win would be to use the highest level fire magic, Flame Wave. But Faye understood that this magic would require too much energy. He understood that he could not allow himself to become exhausted while fighting Alice. Alice needed a rematch because she believed she had to win. Faye understood what the girl had in mind. Alice began to shoot water arrows. At that moment, Faye thought that the girl had managed to achieve an amazing level of mastery of magical power. Faye dodges and curses. He understood that it was difficult to approach the girl. Alice continued to attack the guy. Faye knew that manipulating the elements required too much magical energy. Faye knew that it was too reckless to do this against Alice, whose magic was still in the process of being perfected. Faye decided that he would have to attack Alice from afar. The other students looked at the battle between Alice and Faye in amazement, wondering if it was really a battle between first years. Alice felt that even Fairy couldn't easily break through the water shell, but he still easily blocked the attacking magic. No matter what Alice did, she had no confidence that she would win. She thought about how she could win against the fairy. Faye was thinking about Alice blocking elemental and intermediate magic at this point. It was becoming increasingly difficult for him to play with endurance. Faye creates a wave of fire. He thinks that all he has to do is show off all his abilities at once. The boy launches a fire attack at the girl. Alice uses a water dome to reflect the attack. The fire waves continued to damage the water dome. Faye looked at the girl and thought that she shouldn't let her guard down just because she managed to repel the first attack. Faye used a military trick. He was going to use fire magic, which is incompatible with water magic. It was this magic that he was not going to break through the defense. Alice notices that Faye is going to use another spell. Faye actually intended to break through the defense with high-level earth magic with water magic properties. Faye sent an earth wave towards the girl. Alice's water dome began to sway from side to side. Faye understood that the water shell was focused on increasing the mage's overall defense. So now the boy could break through Alice's defense. The girl understood that she was caught. She thought that the fairy really had a lot of power. She wondered why the boy couldn't make a contract with the spirit. and then she falls to the ground. All the spectators were dumbfounded by the outcome of the battle. They all couldn't believe that Faye had won. Nerold announced that Class E had won. Faye looked at Alice. Then he raised his hand and thought that he had attacked too hard. He didn't think it would be such a strong attack. Everyone started to approach Alice, Jason, and Faye, calling them amazing. They were excited about the battle and congratulated the students on their victory. Many people discussed how Faye used his magic. They noted that his magic was completely different from others. After this battle, the attitude towards mages changed. They were no longer despised. It was the 15th day after Faye's first visit to the royal castle in 6 years. He was currently heading there again. As Alfred Armando, King Armando, had promised, ceremonial preparations for the duel were already underway. Faye was determined. He had finally had the decisive battle with his father Alex. The royal castle was receiving guests. All the aristocrats were heading to the hall where the decisive battle was to take place. Lana sat in the hall and said that the day had finally come for Faye to fight his father. She wondered if her son was okay. The king asked what the girl was talking about. He reminded her that she had started this whole thing. Lana asked why so many people had gathered. The king said that other nobles wanted to see the duel too. The king says there is a lot of interest in the upcoming duel. Lana said that Faye is really a celebrity. Many aristocrats wondered who Lana was. They did not understand why the girl communicated so friendly with the majesty. Bram is being bullied for having to watch the battle on a monitor. His mother says that no matter how good he is, if his father's magic weakens, there will be big trouble. Lana smiles. She wants Faye to do what he always wanted. She believed in her son. Alex entered the arena. Faye was opposite him. Drones were flying around them, filming everything. Alex glared at Faye. Faye watched the man intently. He thought about how Alex was the man he once called father. Alex looked at the guy and thought about why a mage needed magic and spirit magic. He assumed that magic was needed to fight demons, and also to protect what was dear to a person. But Alex thought differently. He assumed that the magic was needed for the sake of one moment, which was happening now. Alex would be sorry if the guy was accidentally defeated because he tried so hard to survive. One of the drones lands near Faye and Alex, announcing that there are 10 seconds left until the battle begins. The drone begins counting down. At this time, Faye gets into a fighting stance. Alex smirks at him because he thinks that the guy is very nervous. In a one-on-one battle between two mages, there are two main options that are taken first. The first is elementary magic spells, which are weak but take less time to cast. They make the enemy lose momentum. The second option is to use non-systemic magic, enchant the body. By deliberately forcing the enemy to cast a spell, a person can block it and use a more powerful one. However, if the opponent is a strong magician, then in the first case, the person will be the loser. In the second case, the stakes become so high that it will be impossible to retreat. Faye looked at his father and thought that the battle had not yet begun. But the magic that was concentrated in Alex's body and his confident posture were exceptional. The entire Bonett family watched the battle begin. Alice wished her brother luck. Bram smirked and thought that no matter what his brother did, he would never defeat their father. The boy thinks that Faye himself is to blame for everything. Faye decided that he needed to hit Alex with magic that he didn't know about. He thought that the most important thing for him was to get a head start. The guy smiled. Faye smiled, thinking that everything was going perfectly. He believed that Alex, the man who tried to ruin his life, was just an aristocrat who had no worthy competitor. He was not going to tolerate this anymore. Faye thought about what strategy he would use. At first, he thought about using a fireball. He decided that for this, he would need to keep his distance and enchant the body. Faye's opponent is the strongest spiritualist mage, so he needs to use his powers to the maximum. The countdown was still ongoing. Faye heard a drone announce that the fight had begun, and immediately began launching fireballs at his father. Alex calmly stopped them with water balloons. Then Faye was right next to his father, which surprised him greatly. Faye pointed his hand at his father and tried to throw a fireball at him. There was an explosion. The audience saw that it was a normal elemental magic, but its execution was very fast. They believed that the ability of the trembling magician was at a high level. Faye looks at the place where his father was and realizes that he has disappeared. Suddenly, Alex appears right behind Faye and says that he is right behind him. Alex raises his hand and throws a stone ball at the guy. Faye doesn't have time to dodge or parry the attack, so she falls on her back. Faye gets up from the floor. Alex comes closer to the guy and says that he did a great job of enchanting his body without a spell. He deservedly praised him. Then the man asks why the guy thought he couldn't do the same. Faye started laughing in response. Alex asked why the guy was laughing. Faye said that his rival was a lord from the 7 powerful families. He asked if the man really thought Faye was that naive. Alex asks the guy again what's so funny about that. Faye looks at the man and says she believes in him. Alex looks at his son in confusion. He asks what this means. Faye says that she believes that the man is stronger than him. Then Alex notices a very familiar technique. Faye is creating a tornado. The guy asks if the man has seen anything like this. The man sees a fire tornado appear near Faye. Faye says the bandits used the same magic when they tried to get rid of him. Alex notices that Faye had a huge amount of magic. He is amazed by the speed of the tornado. The man understands why Bram lost. Faye raises his hand and sends a fire tornado straight at Alex, who was standing right in front of him. Faye has been waiting for a long time for the moment when he can finally fight his father. He thinks that he lived for this moment. Faye convinces himself that he really did everything to fight his father and defeat him. Faye sends a fire tornado towards Alex. The man doesn't move. He smirks, thinking that he had no idea how things would turn out. Alex remembers how the bandits came to his office and said that they had dealt with his son. Alex concentrates magic in his hands and screams at the fairy that he should have simply not existed. A man calls upon his spirit. Faye understands that it was a top-ranked fire panther. The appearance of the spirit alone caused Faye's magic to simply crumble. Faye thinks that it couldn't be that simple. He sends water spears towards his father. Alex asks if the boy is really showing his true power. A fog forms. All the spectators began to swear because they could not see what was happening in the arena. Alex says he's sorry. He smiles and says the boy managed to survive that time. But this time, his father wasn't going to let him go alive. Alex says Faye is weak. He is sure he did the right thing when he ordered his thugs to deal with him. Faye curses. The man attacks his son again and says that chilling magician is just words that mean nothing. Faye responds that maybe that's true. Then he stops himself, thinking that he probably won't be able to win. The fairy throws him back again. He rises and breathes heavily. The boy stared at his father, thinking that his hatred was only growing stronger. Alex wonders if this is really all the boy can do. He says it's a waste of time. Faye wondered what he had trained so long and so hard for all this time. He thought that it was too early to give up. Faye understood that there was a huge difference between what a person was born with and what they learned. Faye knew that wishing alone was not enough. Willing alone would never be enough to make up the difference. Suddenly, Faye hears a voice asking him if the guy is really giving up. The guy gets scared, not understanding where the voice is coming from. The guy hears the same voice and the same question again. Lana notices that the guy is stupefied. She starts to worry about him very much. The voice asks if the boy should give up before he shows his true power. He asks if the boy agrees. Faye asks what true power he needs to show. Faye remembers the 5 Imperial Beasts. He frowns and decides that he will not use their power. The voice asks why the boy refuses to use the power of the 5 Imperial Beasts. Faye replies that he will not use their power, as he has already harmed one of his loved ones before. Faye uses water web. Alex uses his spirit power and asks if such magic can fight against the magic of the spirit of the highest level. Alex says that he is using only a small part of what he is capable of. He tells Faye that he will send him to the afterlife with the strongest spirit magic. The man uses a fire ring. Faye understands that if he does not use the power of the 5 Imperial Beasts, he will definitely lose. Faye hears the voice again, telling him that there is only one way to defeat the highest level spirit. Faye closes his eyes and remembers all those days of his training. The voice asks the boy to remember why the 5 Imperial Beasts chose him. The voice asks if the boy is really ready to end things this way. He says that the boy can use the spirits he made a contract with. Faye hears the voices of the 5 Imperial Beasts who say that they are part of his true power. Faye closes her eyes and agrees. Alex looks at the ring of fire that Faye was in. He smirks, calling the guy a real master. The fire died down and Faye appeared right in the center of the ring. He looked at his father with determination, thinking that if the man calmly used spirit magic against a normal mage, then the boy had no other choice. Faye stands up and forms a seal with his hands. He says that he is the one who sealed the 5 Imperial Beasts. He is the one who bound them with chains. The boy then raises his hands in a seal and says that he is the one who made a contract with the 5 Imperial Beasts. He asks them to allow him to use their power. Faye demands that the 5 Imperial Beasts be released and manifest. He still decided to use them because they were part of his power. Faye puts his hand forward and freezes everything around him. An ice wall with spikes appears around him. Alex and the audience look on in amazement. Alex curses as he realizes that Faye used high-level magic. He is stunned. Then the man saw a guy in the ice wall. Faye cracked the ice wall and came out. Alex asked him what he just did. Alex decided not to slow down and launched a fire arrow at the guy. Then the man turned around as he noticed that his spirit was gone. He started cursing. Alex turned and looked at Faye, asking why he was smiling. The man screams that he will not spare his son. He throws fire spears at him again. Faye freezes all the spears flying at him. Faye looks at his father and says that it is all useless. He is sure that the world is completely subject to his will. He says that everything will freeze. Alex doesn't understand how Faye was able to freeze his fire spears. Suddenly, his leg is covered in ice and the man screams. Faye says that it is impossible for humans to unfreeze his leg. Alex looks at his leg and notices that the ice is starting to spread throughout his body. He curses. The man curses and wonders what is happening. His entire body is covered in ice. Faye watches intently as the man is covered in ice. Alex was screaming, bad-mouthing the guy. He tried to attack him with fire spears, but it didn't work. The man then raised his head and looked worriedly at Faye, who was smiling at him. Alex believed that it was impossible to surpass the magic of the highest-level spirit. He remembered that something like this was only possible with the Crystal of Aaron. Then he finally comes to the conclusion that there is no magic that can defeat the magic of the spirit. Alex couldn't accept that he was defeated by a normal mage. But most of all, he didn't want to be defeated by Faye. He cursed because of hopelessness. The man was completely covered in ice and did not have time to say anything yet. Everyone looked at the outcome of the battle in amazement. The audience wondered what had happened. They assumed that Alex had given up. No one could see anything because of the thick fog. Bram couldn't believe that his father had lost. His mother was very angry. Then Cecilia pointed out that the fog was clearing. Alice, who was sitting next to him, was very worried about her brother Faye. The king pointed out the ice wall to Lana and asked if she knew what it was. Lana said that she herself did not understand what had happened. Lana turns to the king and asks what he is talking about. The king replies that he wants to know how Faye was able to win. The girl asks what the man is talking about. She reminds him that she was with him throughout the fight. She convinces him that nothing could be seen through the fog. The king asks if the girl really doesn't know why the arena around her is covered in ice. The king suspects something, as the boy used high-level magic with particular ease. Lana says she doesn't know anything, she doesn't want to talk about it. The king says he has to find out anyway. The girl says goodbye to the king and leaves. The king calls the girl mean. A servant runs up to the king with a book. The king asks what is going on. He notices that the servant was in a great hurry. The servant shows the king a book called The Legend of the Five Imperial Beasts. Faye lay on the bed and sighed as it was finally all over. He thanked the 5 Imperial Beasts for their help. Alex kicks the table with all his might and curses. Bram asks his father how he could lose. The man answers something he himself does not understand. His wife asks what they will do now. Alex says that there is nothing he can do. He says that there must be punishment. Alex is swearing. He is angry because during the meeting with the king, Lana Dirksert came into the hall and helped him. Armin enters the room. Alex immediately looks at him. Armin smiles and says that he understands everything. The man says that he will carry out the order. Everyone gathered in the hall and bowed before the king. The king was about to announce the punishment for the Bonett family. Alfred Armando orders the confiscation of part of the estates and possessions of the Bonett family, the territories of the eastern part. The king announces that the Bonett family will be under the supervision of the kingdom for 6 months. He states that all of the above must be fulfilled unconditionally. Alex Bonett accepts his punishment. His wife looked at the king with concern. Bram was as concerned as his mother, and Alice and Cecilia looked sad. The king asked Alex to sign if he had no objections. A servant approached Alex with a sheet of paper for signature. The king turns his attention to Faye. He says that the boy will now be officially referred to as Fairy Dirk. Faye also received the title of Baron. The boy was very surprised. The king says that as for the territories confiscated from the Bonnets, he gives them to Faye as his possession. The entire Bonett family was shocked by this statement. Alex turned his gaze to Faye and glared at him. The king says that later all the details will be written down in detail. He says that the Bonnets can leave the castle. The king also adds that later they will need to come again to settle all the formalities and sign the documents. The king asks the fairy to stay a little while. The boy gets up and says that he will stay for a while. The Bonett family leaves. As the door closes, the king turns to Faye and says he has a favor to ask of him. The king points to his daughter and asks if he can do magic with lettuce. Faye blushes and asks what that means. The king folds his arms and says that lettuce needs to be taught magic. The girl at this time begins to be indignant. Faye asks why he should teach Letty's magic if there are court magicians in the kingdom. The king also told Lettuce about it. He looks at his daughter and notices that she has puffed out her cheeks and blushed. The king says that Lettuce told about the promise of the fairy. The boy asks what the promise is. Letty's can't take it anymore and screams about the promise Faye made 6 years ago, the last time he came to the castle. She screams about what the guy promised her. Faye finally remembers the promise he made to the girl when he was walking through the royal garden 6 years ago. The king asks if Faye agrees to teach the girl magic. The guy says that he will teach Letty's magic. Faye ponders the promise. He thinks that the court magicians could teach Letty's much better than he could. Faye looks at the girl and sees that she has turned her head away. Then Lettuce got up from her seat and went down, pulling Faye with her. Faye understood that Lettuce was waiting for the fulfillment of the promise he had made 6 years ago. The guy believed that the girl had a strong will since she remembered the promise even when his death was announced. Letty's takes the boy to a room and asks him to come inside. Faye realized that it was the princess's room. He apologized for intruding. Inside the room, they are met by a maid. She greets Faye and Letty's. The guy's eyes widen in surprise and he blushes. The maid says she is pleased to meet Faye. She gives her name Selena. Faye also introduces herself. Lettuce at this time asks the guy to sit down. Faye sits down on a chair and tries to say something, but Lettuce interrupts him and asks if the guy really forgot about the promise. She asks if she is right. Faye looks away and says that he forgot. Letty's is at first indignant that the guy forgot about the promise he made to the girl. And then she smiles sharply and says that he will be obliged to show her the King's Landing. The guy asks the girl if she really means to go for a walk with him. The girl winks and says it will be just the two of them. Faye is embarrassed that it will be just the two of them. Lettuce shouts out that this will be another promise. Faye asks what this means. Letty says that the guy promised. Faye broke his promise, so he owes her. Faye agrees. Letty's laughs. The guy says that he will start doing magic with the girl at the moment, then the promise will not be considered broken. Letty's looks at Faye darkly and calls upon her spirit. She asks if the boy agrees. Faye agrees. And the girl raises her hands and shouts that she is looking forward to their walk. Faye says she knows too little about King's Landing to give a tour. Lettuce says it doesn't matter. The most important thing is that Faye is there. Faye says it's dangerous for two people to walk around without an escort. Lettuce starts to get indignant. She says the guy has already agreed. She says that if something happens, Faye will save her. Faye wants to say something else, but he stops and agrees with the girl. She calms down and sits down on the couch. Lettuce says that the guy just needs to agree to her proposal. Lettuce blushes and says she's looking forward to their walk around King's Landing. Faye laughs. Faye leaves the room. At this point, the maid Lettuce asks if the girl is really going to have a date. She says that Lettuce is very cute when she is embarrassed. Letty's blushes and screams at the maid to stop saying such things. She asks the woman to help her pick out clothes for the walk. The maid asks if the girl needs clothes. She claims that a man is much more interesting when the girl is naked. Lettuce yells at Selena. Morning came to the kingdom. Trent came to Faye's door and asked him to hurry up. He asked if the boy was ready for a walk. The man asked the boy again but heard nothing, so he went inside the room. He apologized and saw what the fairy was putting on Anna. Faye turns and looks at Trent. He says the man shouldn't have apologized. Anna was telling the guy not to move. She was going to make a prince out of him. Trent looked at Anna and Faye in confusion, then laughed. He said that Faye would go in formal attire. Faye, having changed his clothes, comes out of his room and finds Lettuce. He tries to apologize, but the girl interrupts him and says that she has been waiting for him for a long time. She asks what he has been doing. Faye manages to apologize after all. Letty's blushes and turns her head to the side, looking intently at the guy. Lettuce asked why the guy was looking at her so strangely. Faye put his hands forward and said that the girl was very cute. Lettuce became embarrassed. The maid pointed to her watch and said that they had to hurry. Lettuce also looked at her watch and realized that they were already late. Letty's grabbed the guy's hand abruptly and led him along. The guy tried to stop the girl, but to no avail. Faye asked what was the matter. He wanted to know why the girl was in such a hurry. Lettuce said she didn't want to waste time. She said she wanted to have as much fun with the guy as possible. The girl was happy that she was going on a date. Faye blushed. Suddenly they stopped. The guy asked what the girl was doing. Lettuce was putting on her hat and talking about how they needed to hide from the guards. Faye wondered why they were doing that. Faye asked if the princess had permission. Lettuce said she had permission, but there were still some restrictions. Faye asks what will happen if they get caught. He says that he will be scolded anyway. Lettuce asks the guy not to worry. She says that she told everyone that she was working with Selena. Faye says that there is nothing to be done. He raises his finger and uses magic. He decided to use the search circle. Extra systematic magic. The searching circle spread a small amount of magic power and used the effect of this power to determine where people were in the spell area. Faye learned that there were 8 people in front, 5 people on the right and left, and only 3 behind them. Faye picks up the girl and apologizes. He enchants his body. He decides that they need to escape while there are few guards. The girl only asks what the guy is going to do. Faye quickly moves. Faye used the spell Dark Spirit Doll, a synthetic advanced magic developed in a painful attempt to escape his pursuers when Faye was exiled from the Bonett family. The guards noticed something and ran forward, trying to detain the offenders. At this time, Faye and Lettice were right behind them. Faye asked if the castle had always been so lightly guarded. He and Lettice walked toward the castle's exit. When Lettice and Faye reach the city, the guy asks the girl what her plans were. Lettice reminds the guy that they have a date. The girl asks him not to speak in a formal tone. She feels like the guy is accusing her of being of royal blood. Suddenly, the girl gets an idea and asks the guy to call her by her first name only. Faye asks how he can call a girl that way. Faye asks the girl if he can call her by her first name, Letty. The girl points out that Faye just dropped the S. She says she still doesn't mind. Then the girl smells something. She asks what it smells like. Faye asks if the girl wants something to eat. Lettice turns away and says she's not very hungry. Faye asks why the girl is trying to hide the fact that she's not hungry. Faye and Lettice walked through the streets of the royal capital. The guy noticed that the girl was drooling at the sight of food. Faye says that he is very hungry. He turns to the girl and asks if she wants to have a snack with him. The girl was confused at first and then smiled. She blushed and said that she would only agree because Faye insisted. Faye did not understand why the girl was acting so strangely. Faye and Lettice approach the food stand. They are immediately greeted by the vendor. They voice their order, and the vendor immediately begins preparing the order. Faye and Lettice had a snack together. The girl looked pleased. She really liked the food. Lettice followed Faye and asked him what they would do next. The guy thought about it and then used the spell Circle Search just in case. He decided to check if there were any enemies nearby. Faye noticed that 5 people suddenly disappeared. Faye realized that they were being followed. Faye realized that the pursuers were keeping a certain distance. He wondered what their goal was. Lettice noticed that Faye had become tense. Faye smiled and said that nothing like that had happened. Faye points to a crowd of people and says that something interesting seems to be happening there. He invites the girl to take a look. Lettice agrees. The girl was delighted with the walk. Faye looked at her, and it seemed to him that the girl was really having fun. He did not want to disturb her unnecessarily. Faye turns to the girl and asks if she can wait for him for a bit. He says he saw something and needed to step away and look. Lettice asks why the guy suddenly takes off. Faye does not answer her questions. The girl says that in that case she will go with him. The guy refuses. He says that it would be better if the girl waits for him. Lettice agrees. As Faye went to check on the pursuers, Lettice looked after him and wondered what had happened. Faye decided to use the Circle Search to make sure Lettice was safe. He needed to eliminate the suspicious people. Faye saw with the help of a spell that the pursuers were moving further and further away from him. He did not understand why they were leaving, but Faye understood that he could not let the pursuers get away. Faye enchanted his body again and sped up. He was finally able to catch up with his pursuers. The boy turned to the hooded men and asked why they were following him and Lettice. Suddenly, all the pursuers jumped on the wall and tried to escape. But Faye stopped them with magic. He made the walls earthen. The boy then tied up the pursuers with earthen ropes. One of the pursuers says he expected nothing less from Faye. The boy noticed the coat of arms on the pursuers' armor. He realized that they were the castle guards. Faye understands why they were pursuing him and Lettice. He asks why the guards did not immediately say that they would follow them. One of the guards answers that they wanted to tell them in advance, but the king forbade them to do so. Faye asks if the guards are sure that the castle is safe. One of the guards says that Faye should not worry, as the castle was as safe as ever. Faye began to realize that the number of guards had been deliberately reduced so that he and Lettice could pass through safely. Everything had been approved by the king. Faye asks if there was anyone else besides the guards. One of the guards assures the guy that he doesn't have to worry about it and can go back to Lettice. The guy remembers the girl and is about to leave. Faye returns to Lettice and apologizes for making her wait for him. Lettice asks why the guy didn't buy anything. Faye says that what he saw wasn't as interesting as he thought. Lettice gets it. Faye points to a building and says they should go in there. Lettice asks if there is anything interesting there. Faye says they should go in and see it. Faye smiles and says that the building is a good place to make money. Lettice says that's impossible. Faye asks why Lettice thinks that. Lettice reminds the boy that Faye became a baron and became a nobleman. She says that the boy received the status in exchange for protecting their country and its inhabitants from all sorts of terrible evil. Lettice argues that a nobleman cannot make money in such a way. Faye lowers her head and looks gloomy. Lettice asks if Faye is okay. Suddenly, a hooded man appears, smiling and saying that he has found his target. Faye feels someone's magic. Then he falls to the ground because he feels pain in his head. Lettice stops and asks Faye what happened. She was very worried about the guy. Faye tried to understand what had happened. He heard the girl again, asking him if everything was okay. The guy answered that nothing terrible had happened. The girl asked him again and said that she was not obliged to hide her abilities. Faye felt a power that was comparable to the 5 Imperial Beasts. He looked up and wondered who was using such power. A man in a black robe was floating in the sky, laughing. The unknown man said that if he ate ice, he would gain new strength. The unknown man says that he can eat fire, ice, wind, thunder, and earth, but he decides to start with ice. It was already quite late in the kingdom. Letty's remembered from the trip to the King's Landing. She was in this place for the first time and she liked it very much. She would like to go back there again and repeat everything. Then the girl turns around and asks Faye if he wanted to go back to this place. The guy was carrying boxes with the girl's purchases. He answered that he really wanted to go back. Letty's approaches the guy and is happy that he supports her. She asks if the guy wants to repeat the walk next time. Faye says that she is not against repeating the walk. Then he adds that he will agree only if the girl does not do a lot of shopping. A security guard approaches Faye and takes away the boxes of groceries. He thanks the guy and says that they can handle the rest themselves. Faye thanks him in return. Lettuce is indignant. She asks why the guy is acting as if she has tortured him with her shopping trips. Letty's approaches Faye and says goodbye to him. She asks if the guy will come to her to meet again. She really wanted to repeat the walk as she had so much fun. The guy doesn't have time to answer. The girl jumps away from him and waves her hand one last time. Faye smiles and waves her hand back. He asks the girl to take care of herself. Then Faye becomes more serious as he senses someone's presence. He quickly shifts his gaze to the side and then turns around completely. Faye remembered the moment when his head suddenly ached and he fell to the ground. He understood that they were being watched the whole time. Faye goes to the carriage and sees Trent, who reports that the carriage is ready. The guy bowed and thanked the servant. Trent apologized for causing Faye so much trouble. He asked the boy to be more careful on the road. The carriage started moving. Faye rode in the carriage through the woods. He cursed because he felt that he was being closely watched. He understood that it was the enemy. Faye assumed that these were the same bandits who attacked him when he was thrown out of the Bonett family. Then the boy decided that it wasn't them because it would be too risky for them. He kept wondering who was following him. He tried to remember those who would want to harm him. Faye lived in the forest most of his life. Before he started school, he had no contact with people at all. Black tentacles appeared near the carriage. First, they crawled inside the carriage and scared the guy, and then they wrapped around the entire carriage, causing it to stop. The coachman was very scared and the horses started to kick. Faye tried to understand what was happening. He had never seen magic like this before, so he couldn't tell exactly who was attacking him. Faye jumped out of the carriage, but black tentacles were still clinging to his legs. They were trying to stop the guy and prevent him from escaping. Faye decided that he should run away. He was very worried because he couldn't afford to be caught. Suddenly, black tentacles grabbed Faye by the legs. He couldn't move. As a result, the guy fell to the ground, screaming in pain.